just look for the signal to go live then.
It did something to me. Am I there?
Yeah.
I see
Okay.
you.
Okay, perfect.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Standing Committee meeting of May 18th, 2021. I will call this meeting to order. Administration, any changes to the agenda?
No changes. Thanks.
Council, any changes to the agenda? Then I will look for a motion to adopt. Councillor Nelson,
I move that we adopt the Standing Committee agenda for May 18th, 2021.
excellent. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, citizens minute with council. Ms. Anderson, is there anyone in the queue this evening?
No citizens registered for citizens minute with council.
Thank you very much. Then we will move on to our action items. First one, Spray Park Shades Capital Project. And I will throw it over to you, Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is before council tonight to seek direction on the Spray Park Shades capital project that was included in the 2021 capital plan, which currently is funded by a donation from the Prom Association Legacy Committee. The town would like to acknowledge and is very grateful for the consideration of this project by the Prom Association Legacy Committee, and appreciate that the donation, the expected donation. Conversation with the committee has been ongoing, and at this time the donation amount is expected to come in underneath the $40,000 required to complete the project as it was outlined in the capital plan. With the uncertainty of the timeline for that donation and the decision there, and the additional unbudgeted funds potentially required to complete the project, the recommended action for this item is to postpone until 2022 so that budget adjustments can be made. The timelines for the project at this point would not allow for completion before or in preparation for use during the summer months of the spray park. At this time, I'll turn it over to council for questions. Ms. Howarth is present tonight to assist me in answering anything that council would like to know more about.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, questions for admin? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, admin, I guess my question is on the last, basically the last line of page 3 of 74 of our agenda package. Can you just tell me if I'm misunderstanding this? It basically says that the final deliverables, design procurement, it hasn't been finalized due to the outstanding decision of the actual donation. Does that mean that we're waiting on the actual donation to occur, like that hasn't been finalized yet?
Admin? Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look to Ms. Howarth for some assistance there.
Thank you, CAO Olson, through to council. So that is correct. The group hasn't had a chance, being a volunteer group, to get together during the COVID and over the winter here to kind of nail that down. The other piece of that is that we're looking at this more of a partnership project, that we're partnering with them. And so it's not at all about, just getting the money and then we decide what we're going to do with it and throw some more in maybe and call it a day. We're knowing that group will likely want to have and be engaged in the decisions about what that looks like, what we get, because it is going to be their sort of legacy project from that organization. And so some of that stuff, we have not had those conversations, and it will be based again on what they're able to contribute, as well as what then the town will be able to contribute, either through accessing grants or our reserves. So if I've missed anything, Mr. Von Claveren is online as well, but I think we're good. Okay, thanks.
All right, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have Mayor Michaels and then Councillor Race in the queue next. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess question for administration. I just want to clarify in the analysis, it seems that they're willing or they're able to commit 25,000. So I just want to confirm that we would get 25,000 from them. But then in option C, it says that we would have to find funds up to 40,000. So I just want to clarify, are we talking about $15,000 is what we would have to use to top up to get the entire 40? Or is it 40,000 that we would have to if you want to move along with this project in 2021?
Ms. Olson?
Ms. Howard.
Thank you, CAO Olson, through to council. The answer to both of those questions is yes. We don't know for sure exactly how much the group, early conversations well over a year ago, the number was different than what our recent conversations were at the end of 2020 and well into 2021. So that number is a little bit fluid right now. And so if, for example, council would like us to pursue this project and complete it this year, and if by chance we cannot come to an agreement with the group that's donating some of the money, we could end up with nothing from the group for whatever reason. And then the project would need to be fully funded, for example, from the reserve. So until we have that secured in an agreement and we know exactly how much we're going to benefit from their contribution, we won't know. It could be the full 40,000. It's not likely. We don't have an indication that they're going to completely change their mind and maybe contribute to some other legacy in the community. Mr. Van Cloberen has been the one that's been connecting with the representative from that committee. So if I may invite him just to round out that answer a little bit, because it is kind of a yes to both.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the council. No, that's correct. It is exactly what it is. The group has, have conversations, especially with me, to contribute this money, but it's not finalized yet. So there's no certainty that it will be, of course, this year. So if we are pushing through with the project as a municipality, we might end up with the full amount. Similar basically to another option that's in there. If we postpone it indefinitely, later, the committee might look, of course, in the future, of course, also to other opportunities. So that's why there is up to the 40,000. We anticipate still the 25-ish coming from this committee and this legacy fund.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm of the mindset, I don't know why we wouldn't maybe consider moving forward on a condition that, anything $25,000 that we get from them, and anything, that's short of the 40,000 that we would cover, and we allocate it to whatever reserve and we move forward. If not, it comes back to council, but it sounds like there just hasn't been a meeting. So I don't know the details of why this committee hasn't met. Maybe we need to write them a letter saying we want to partner, but we need an answer by a certain date to get this project moving forward. But it sounds like they've committed to this before, but there's something missing. So my train of thought is I don't want to kick this down the road. These shades are much needed. Many families have complained about how hot it gets down there. There's really no shade. You have to bring your own. I really don't want to kick it down. That's my train of thought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have Councillor Race next in queue, and then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in regards to the cost of 40,000, if we delay this project until next year, I'm fearful that 40,000 could go to 45 to 50,000, especially if a piece of wood was involved in this project. So is that something that we should be mindful of? If we delay this project, that costs could be higher?
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'll look to Ms. Howard and Mr. Van Cloberen to help provide some additional information on the $40,000 quote that's included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Olson, through to council. We may already be in that situation. At the beginning of the budget process, we were early in COVID. Now, almost a year later, whether we can still get the supplies, whether we can get them on time, whether they're all the pieces, the the bids to work on the project, that has all changed dramatically for everybody. So since this was approved in budget, there are already those moving pieces that could change exponentially and get worse for next year, or it could all settle down and we would be just fine. So either way, these shades would not be in place for this summer. None of the options that we're looking at right now provide shade for this entire summer. The best case scenario is that council gives us direction and it can get ratified at your next regular meeting. We would tender the project. Hopefully we can get what we thought we could get when we set this up last fall during budget. And we could tender it and it can get implemented, and maybe the middle of August, but more likely into September is when we would have those shades. So in many ways, pushing it forward this year or putting it into next year's budget and starting the project in January when the budget is approved, assuming that it gets put forward and approved for 2022, we would start this project as soon as possible in January of 2022. Make sure that we have it funded, designed, tendered out, all of that kind of thing, so that come spring, we're ready to build and install that, and so that it would be ready for next summer. So it was kind of a complicated answer, but it kind of speaks to a few of those pieces. We're hoping we can still do what we wanted to do with 40,000, but we're a bit at the mercy of whatever changes have happened in the market since we put this project forward.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Race, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you, sir. So if I'm hearing you correctly, 40,000 is not a true number right now. Would that be correct?
CEO Olson.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. That is correct. I could have Mr. Von Claveren speak to it. He worked on it with his team last year when we were putting it through for budget, and can speak to how those numbers were decided upon.
Yeah, thank you, and through to council and Councillor Race. Yes, that's correct. Of course, when we start projects like this, we started it a couple of years ago already with looking into it. So the quotes that we made up to put 40,000 towards this is really something that we do in an early stage. So current market conditions will make for sure that this number of 40,000 is a fluid number. So you can do two things, or you go and you estimate that it's going to be higher, or you adjust the project as is. So 40,000 is most likely not a fluid. Yeah, it's a fluid number basically.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I have Councillor Magoon, Mayor Michaels, and then Councillor Haas.
I'll actually defer to the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put a direction on the floor. It's option 3, Wendy, and it changes. The only change is the $40,000 is $20,000. And if I can speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Do you want it up on the board first to get a look at it before we speak to it, or?
Yeah, if you'd like. Perfect. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like we're $15,000 short. I'm comfortable moving forward, upping that 15,000 to 20, give a little bit of wiggle room in order to get this project done. This gives an opportunity for administration to reach out to the chair of this committee, ask them to hold a Zoom meeting to see if we can get those funds up to $25,000 and get this project going. Something else could happen in January of next year. We are looking forward to this. If it has to start in the fall, it starts in the fall, but it's over and done with. I think the community wanted us to get this done. This allocates certain funds to the equation. And if $20,000 from the master trail funds isn't enough, then it would come back to council, and then we can reassess where do we want to put more money into this. We'll have better insight on whether the committee has any money to give us, but it sounds like there is. There's just some communication in the meeting that has to happen, and I'm comfortable committing $20,000 of that money to getting this done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Haas, did you want to speak to this motion in particular?
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I appreciate Mayor Michaels bringing this forward. I'm in agreement. I'm in support of this. I think, this is a project that's been a long time coming. We've got a lot of feedback from the community, in that area. And I think, this gives ample time, like Mayor Michael said, for administration to reach out to that committee and get a more, concrete answer on that. So, and then if by July 6th, we have an answer and it's not what we were looking for, then we have another conversation to have. So I think it's just crucial to get this project on the hit the road. So we need to get it going. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I have Councillor Nelson and Councillor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be in support of this. It's in front of us now. We've got a full agenda report. We've got pictures. This is all a better time to make a decision than it being a $15,000 line item on a $30 million budget. To me, it has the attention now, and we've got a couple weeks between now and regular to flush it out if we need to. But to me, it just gives an opportunity for not even transparency, just the ability for the public to kind of understand what we're doing, which is unlikely to happen during a budget process. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to support this moving forward as well. I think one of the conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks is that when we're presented with, as a council, with projects like this, there's definitely a public desire to see decisions being made that move these, fairly simple projects forward. And in this case, we have a willing partner. And as the mayor said, all that needs to happen is to initiate that conversation to get this project moving. I'm all for that. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Magoo. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will support this motion moving forward. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else with a comment or question before we call this to question? Seeing no one else in the queue, then I will call the question. That committee direct administration to bring a report to the regular council meeting of July 6, 2021 for decision regarding a revised capital budget 2021-2025. That reflects a Parks and Trails Major Reserve funding contribution of up to $20,000 for the 2021 Spray Park Shades project. All those in favor? That passes unanimous. Thank you very much, CAO Olson and admin, for that report. That takes us on to our next action item, which is, or is there any other action coming out of that report, council? Nope. Okay. That takes us to the Collaborative Marketing Fund COVID-19 Resilience Support. And I throw it over to you, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the May 4th regular meeting of council provided direction to administration to bring forward additional information on a collaborative marketing program that would provide a grouping of 3 or more businesses funding to increase their marketing development and activities locally and throughout the region and province. The eligibility requirements are largely the same as the COVID-19 Business Resiliency Support Program that council received earlier this month. And the permitted expenses include, but are not limited to, the development of a marketing plan, content development, advertising costs, both for social and traditional media, graphic design, and video production. The research into a collaborative marketing program was driven by inquiries from local businesses looking to partner and build on their local marketing efforts. The provision of $500 per business with a minimum of 3 businesses and a maximum of 10 businesses would encourage our local business community to partner and extend the reach of their marketing both in Hinton and outside the community. The delivery of the program may be supported by the Chamber of Commerce with compensation for the administrative support provided to about 5%. The chamber is meeting this Thursday, and this is an item that they will be discussing. So unfortunately, we don't have a decision on that from the chamber at this point. We're awaiting the conversation that's happening this week. So therefore, we've included an additional direction in this report just to ensure that the program could move ahead regardless of the outcome of that conversation with the chamber. Should council proceed with the recommended action, any amendment to what has been presented, or any amendment to what has been presented, a report will come to council on June 8th for decision. At this time, I have Mr. Rousseau present to assist me in answering any questions that council may have.
I had put myself on mute. It's over to us now, and Councilor Magoon in the queue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the question I have for administration is if you could clarify the 5% service fee that's been identified. I needed a little bit more understanding around that. Thanks.
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may look to Mr. Rousseau to assist in the answer. So it's largely the same as the Community Futures West Yellowhead administrative fee that will be allocated through the COVID Business Resiliency Support Program. It's to recognize the efforts that they put in administering the program. So the 5%, I would look to Mr. Rousseau if that's 5% overall or 5% per application. I assume it's largely the same as the Community Futures decision, in which it's 5% per application, approved application. Mr. Rousseau, is that your understanding as well?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Olson, through to the chair to council. That is exactly true. The preface is the same as for the Community Futures. If the chamber is going to administer this on our behalf, we'll know that by Thursday. What they would do for the 5% would also include eligibility, ineligibility questions, clarification, and it's a typical, as you would remember, it's a market-related admin fee that is typically charged for items like this.
Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, and if I may just follow up on that particular point, Mr. Chair, thank you. I guess my question is, if it was the will of council to pass the second recommended action, which involves that 5% fee, and the Chamber of Commerce, for whatever reason, didn't support the 5% fee, would it then, by default, I'm assuming, come back to us for further discussion and decision?
CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair, the intention of the motions are that regardless of the outcome of the conversation with the Chamber of Commerce, that we'd be in a position to move ahead with the program. So the third piece of direction, I guess, for council to consider tonight, or recommended action for council to consider tonight, is to empower administration to administer the program on our own to ensure that it could move forward. We'd love to partner with different agencies in our community, and we're very fortunate to have many agencies that are very interested in supporting programs like this, such as Community Futures West Yellowhead and the Chamber. So that's where we would look first. If not, we would, and with council's direction to move forward with the program, we'd look to manage this internally. And just to clarify, the 5% for both the Community Futures service fee and the Chamber is outside of the approved amount of the, so the 30,000 wouldn't be reduced. And likewise, the 100,000 for the other program is not reduced by that service fee as well.
You good with
Thank
that,
you very
Councilor Magoon?
Yes, if I could go back in queue, please, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Okay, I have Councilor Nelson, myself, Councilor Race, and then Councilor Magoon back in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is around the collaborative part of this. In our report and our documentation, it talks about 3 or more businesses up to a max of 10. But I didn't see that anywhere in the actual application portion. And I'm just curious how we or whoever administering it is would know or determine that it does include different businesses.
CEO Olson.
Thank you. that may have been an oversight in the preparation of the application package. I believe, Mr. Russo, do you have something to add?
Yeah, thanks, CA Olson. Through to the chair to council. It's a little bit of an oversight, but also the draft document that's attached for the application is actually draft. So all comments that we would have gleaned from here tonight would be incorporated. It's not cast in stone.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, part of the reason that I'm a little bit concerned about it is the amount for $500. The amount of information that is required, and you then need to go to your neighbors and say, hey, we want to do this. And I'm concerned about the overall administration on both, whether it's the town or whether it's the chamber, but also those businesses, just how much is involved to get what is, in the scheme of things, a relatively small amount per door to them. So it is one of the concerns, and oversight or whether that comes in a final document, it would actually impact some of the ways that I think about it, because I think right now simplicity and nimbleness is key. So thank you.
Okay, I'm actually going to defer because Councillor Nelson stole what I wanted to ask about, which was about the collaborative component of the application. So I will send it over to Councillor Race, Councillor Magoon, and then I will try to regroup at that point and ask something else. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Do we, or does admin have the people capacity to handle this, to take on this administrative role of this money? The plate seems to be full. We have our action pending list is quite long. So I'm just wondering if this is a task that would add to the plate and what would have to maybe be taken away.
I will pass that over to CAO Olson.
Sure. I'll look to Mr. Russo for some support.
Thank you, CA Olson. Through to the chair, to council. Yes, the plate is full if you look at our tracking sheet, but the way we've set this up is that it should not be too onerous for the applicant or applicants to apply for this. The bigger part of the administration is the financial part to administer the eligibility and the ineligibility. So it's not that it will not impact. It just may mean a reprioritization dependent on the uptake of the applications. But it's doable for administration. We talked about that internally.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank
you,
Mr.
Councillor.
Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really just a legislative question for administration. The third recommended action, the one that has administration in a position to administer the fund if the chamber were not to support it moving forward. I guess my question is, do we have a legislative recommendation on whether or not that should be passed tonight? Are we comfortable with that? Or is that something we hold in our back pocket in case the chamber doesn't support it? Because to be fair, I personally, I'm trying to think of a time when we've, as a council, have made, I don't know, call it a contingency motion like that. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with it. I just wondered if administration had talked about that at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And over to you, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council also has the ability to pass some direction for this item to come back to the June 8th regular council meeting without including the detailed direction. We wanted to include that and to kind of spell it out as to to include our thought process, I suppose, to what council needs to consider when this does move ahead. So when this comes to, or if council passes direction for this to come to June 8th, whether with that motion or by following what's listed under the recommended action, should we get clarification from the Chamber of Commerce between now and then, that will be reflected in what comes forward. So I suppose we could keep it in the back pocket and it doesn't need to move ahead. However, we were trying to prepare council for the conversation that will happen when the decision is made on June 8th.
Councilor Magoon? Good, okay. Councilor Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been some good conversation tonight. I personally would rather keep our powder dry with this $30,000. I struggle in that with 0 cases, we had a state of local emergency, and with 17, 18 cases, we're funding, basically, the town is funding businesses to bring traffic in their doors. If this was specific to setting up e-commerce sites or things that lend themselves to what we're trying to accomplish as a bigger community, I would be more behind it. But I would rather have this $30,000 in our back pocket, ready to flow out to business when a restart and recovery is we're on the eve of that. To me, that's the right time. The likelihood, we hit June 8th, we make a decision, we get all the mechanics sorted out, for a lot of the businesses that would likely be taking advantage of it for the summertime are going to be very rushed to figure out a way to make this work. And looking at someone from the business community and myself, it's something we would have likely used for, just boosting some Facebook ads. And to me, that's maybe not the best way to spend $30,000 of taxpayer money. So to me, I don't know what motion to make to kind of keep our powder dry, but I would rather this be a decision that we make when we're ready for a restart and recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that committee direct administration to undertake the collaborative marketing fund for COVID-19 resilience support of $30,000 to promote local businesses working in partnership with 3 or more partners to promote their businesses funded by the Emergency Response Reserve as presented. And if I could speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
This has been at the heart of what I've been discussing with businesses this last week. There certainly was some discussion about our last, business recovery strategy that we approached earlier in the spring. And this particular area was identified to me multiple times as having been missed by council. A number of businesses that I talked about exactly that, driving foot traffic in their door because they are in recovery mode. And many of them, they're looking for any kind of ways to sort of reduce the pain of what's been happening to them in terms of COVID. And I do agree with Councilor Nelson. There's so many aspects of this from a large scale economic process, right? There's the recovery aspect, there's the survival aspect, there's the, trying to encourage and incentivize new businesses to come in. These are all discussions that I've had with other people in this last week. It's funny how this is sort of coming together here. But that doesn't negate the importance of any one aspect of this larger view. And I think having a collaborative marketing plan is an important part of supporting our local businesses who have been hurt through COVID. So again, I'm very happy to support this moving forward. This is in line with what I've been talking to businesses about and the support that they've been asking for. If they weren't asking for it, I wouldn't be supporting it. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Anybody else? We have a motion on the board now. Councilor Race?
Thank you, sir. So what if we had some local businesses who could not find 3 other businesses to partner up with? Are they eliminated? Are they exempt? Do we help them find a partner? So what do we do there? And that's to council or admin.
Okay. I guess I'll throw that over to admin first. CAO Olson, what options are there for businesses who are not able to partner up with 2 other people?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look to Mr. Rousseau in his conversations with Mr. Kovach and the research that went into the program.
Thank you, CA Olson, through to the Chair Council. The intent is not to exclude anyone that may not fit the situation we're talking about. We will be looking for how we could connect people with potential partnerships or to other people. So we will not turn them away to say you're not eligible in that respect.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir, very much.
All right. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in overall, I support this. I'd like for this to go forward. My only question is kind of tied to what Councillor Race was saying. I guess my question to administration, is there any, what are the negatives of making this maybe one or more partners and making it a bit more flexible for that? Any pros and cons from your perspective on loosening the partnership aspect of this to just one partner or more?
CEO Olson.
Chair, that's absolutely within council's purview to provide direction. The intent was to promote the collaboration between local businesses, and it stemmed from some conversations with our business community around the opportunity to partner in a Travel Alberta collaborative marketing program. It seemed like businesses had already kind of connected, and we had oversubscription or over interest in what we were able to do with Travel Alberta. So this was really in response to what we were seeing in the community already. There isn't, I guess, a lot of risk. We were looking to promote that collaboration piece and to connect some businesses together. $500 goes a little ways, but when you're partnering with additional businesses and you have $1,500 or more, your reach can really be extended. So not only within the community itself, but when things loosen up and we do see a return of travelers through the region, there's also no time frame for the use of the funds, I suppose. So the funds could be provided, and there could be a fall campaign that businesses could be entering into with each other to utilize that money when it's safe to be inviting people from outside the community to return.
Mr.
Michaels?
Chair,
Yep.
Well, two things. One, I just want to clarify just on the wording. Is this 3 or more partners excluding the original person? Just to know. So it would be $1,500. It'd be one business partnering with 2 others. So it'd be 3 partners in total. Or are we talking about it's minimum 4 partners? Because in reading it, I'm not overly sure.
CEO Olson.
The intention was for 3.
3 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for the confusion.
Okay. And if I may, I'll wait and see what the rest of council says. I may ask Councillor Magoon for a friendly amendment to make it maybe 1 partner, 1 partner or more. But for the sake of not going back and forth, I'll wait and see what the rest of council says. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I have Councillor Nelson and then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a higher level question, but CEO Olson's comments made me think of another question that talking that they could use them in the fall. I like that concept, but this is based on first come, first serve. And so would that be first come, first serve with application or first come, first serve with the spend? And if it's first come, first serve with the application, then how long do they get to basically have that money allotted to them before it turns over to somebody else if they don't use it?
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The idea was that the first come, first serve through applications. That's a great question and maybe something I'm not sure that we have an answer to at this point, a time frame for when it returns to the pot. So I don't know that I can answer the second part of that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just in speaking to the mayor's and I think Councillor Race's concerns, yeah, I would certainly find that that suggested friendly amendment quite reasonable.
Okay. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request a friendly amendment to change the wording to partnerships with 2 or more partners. And I like to, I appreciate the administration's background information on this. This will, I think, bring it a bit more flexibility. They still have the option of using that advantage of 1,500, 2,000 if they want to partner with more, absolutely. But just in the mild situations where there's a synergy for just 2, why exclude that? So for me, I'd be comfortable with that. So that's what I'd like to propose to Councillor Magoon. Thank you.
Hey, you're open to that, Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, would we be able to see the, excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Magoon, the change in the chat, does that reflect what you're amenable to?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Council, any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think in addition to the concerns I had before, I think a larger campaign has a higher likelihood to have a bigger local impact than $500 per door. I think a $30,000 investment, likely with the ability to go and capture matching grants, I think could be used to do things that bring more traffic into our community and do more for business as a whole than the individual grants do. And I think it also has a higher likelihood of increasing that local spend and having that $30,000 multiply. That's my thoughts and my communication with businesses. It's a lot of administration for something that likely could go further if it was a big batch. So I'll vote against this, although I'm happy we're spending $30,000 to support business. I believe there's a better and different way to do it. Thank you.
I have myself in the queue and then Councillor Magoon. I have similar thoughts to Councillor Nelson with regards to, I just think $30,000 in a larger campaign might be a more effective spend, rising tide lifting all boats sort of situation. I'm also concerned that we're going to end up with $30,000 in purchased Facebook ads that, there won't be any sort of lasting capacity built through this. So I'm going to be voting against this for that reason. It'll be, if I end up losing the vote, it won't be one I'll be sorry about, because we are at least investing $30,000 in helping local business. But I just think, honestly, I think we could direct that money to have a bigger impact. Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Magoon.
I certainly respect the comments made by both the chair and Councillor Nelson, but here's my concern as an individual councillor, is that there was no outstanding motion on the floor to investigate the usage of that $30,000. And I could certainly support a widespread campaign that investigates the use of video media to support a large scale number of our businesses across the community. But to be fair, that motion didn't exist. And there was an absence of that on the floor. And we're about to go into the summer, one where we're going to see a lot more people locked down or traveling within the province. And a lot of our businesses stand to gain or lose based on our action or inaction as a council. So if any other councillor has got a plan or a motion waiting in the wings that deals with that or directs administration to explore that quickly, I'm all for it. But if that doesn't exist, a lot of our local businesses, they can't stand to wait until the fall for the perfect business plan, because that doesn't exist right now. So I would rather have something that can keep our businesses moving now, rather than promise them something that's not going to help them at all potentially. So again, if there's a plan, or if somebody has a vision for a large scale motion that can be conducted quickly, I could be convinced to vote against my own motion. But in the absence of that, I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
All right, seeing nobody else in the queue, I will call to question that committee direct administration to undertake the collaborative marketing fund for COVID-19 resilience support of $30,000 to promote local businesses working in partnership with 2 or more partners to promote their businesses funded by the Emergency Response Reserve as presented. All those in favor? All those opposed? Sorry. You're on.
Sorry, I just, prior to it calling to question, when this was presented originally, it was supposed to be funded through the economic development budget, not through the emergency response reserve when this came to us originally. So I just want to confirm that it would be through the emergency response reserve, not through the economic development budget, which was originally presented, I don't know, a couple months ago when we first saw it. Sorry, I'm just catching that now as it was read back. I apologize for the disruption.
Okay. CAO Olson.
Intention is to use the emergency response reserve. This was mentioned in the previous report regarding the business resilience support program. Both were to be funded from the emergency response reserve.
Yeah, and apologies for not doing the prep to see this ahead of time, but I don't know that it really matters, but I'll still vote against it. But I think I do. When we originally talked about this, it was coming through. I'm pretty sure economic budget. Apologies if I'm incorrect on that one. So sorry, Chair, for interrupting the vote there.
All right. Well, we'll try this again, which means I'm going to have to read it again, Councillor Nelson. That's on you. All right, I'll call the question again. That committee direct administration to undertake the collaborative marketing fund for COVID-19 resilience support of $30,000 to promote local businesses working in partnership with 2 or more partners to promote their businesses funded by the Emergency Response Reserve as presented. All those in favor? All those opposed? That is a 3-3 split, so that means it is defeated. Okay. Council, anything else on this item? Councillor Haas.
Thank you. Based on that decision, then I guess my question to administration is the $30,000. We've already earmarked $100,000 for the resiliency. We've got now $30,000. What then potentially are we going to do with that? Is it going to stay in the emergency reserve and then till, or is there another option that might be brought to us?
CAO Olson.
Mr. Chair, at this time, the funds would remain in the emergency response reserve. If council wishes to provide any additional direction for the use of that funds or an additional report that explores some options, at this point, we don't have anything up our sleeve for the use of that money.
Well, and if I appreciate, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up with that.
Councillor Haas.
I think, we owe it to our community. We've got $30,000. We've now defeated a motion to potentially use that to, market, help assist in marketing our businesses. So now we've got $30,000 that we need to talk and discuss and figure out what we're going to do. Because, as Councillor Magoon stated, our businesses do, want our help. And so, I'm not prepared. I was in favor of this personally, and I'm not prepared at this time to make any directions, but I think it's something we need to seriously consider and not let it sit. So thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Magoon and Councillor Racine-Q.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and that's my concern exactly, Councillor Haas. I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of ways that we can use this to help local business. At this point, working to convince my fellow councillors, I think one of the ideas that I've heard of in the community that bears merit is the use of this funding for essentially a mass media campaign that promotes multiple businesses across the town of Hinton, which can then be promoted on places like the Town of Hinton website. Copies of each snippet of businesses appearing in that video could then also be used by those individual local businesses to promote on their own Facebook or their own web pages. Something that, demonstrates and promotes a lot of our businesses, but then can also be used at a local individual business level to benefit them individually as well. That is an idea that I've heard, and I, would ask council to consider, because I think, again, it bears merit, and it doesn't, as Councillor Waugh had mentioned, just plug money into Facebook in terms of boosting ads, which, I think would be beneficial as well. And I'll see what the rest of council thinks about that. Thank you.
Councillor Race next in the queue.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make a direction.
Okay.
And that would be option 3. And I believe, Wendy, you would have it. Option 3, that committee direct administration to provide further information regarding the collaborative marketing fund for COVID-19 resilient support. And I'm making this direction so that the funds will be available to be used. I would the phrase that Councillor Waugh said was a turning point to me, to have all boats rise with the rising tide. I don't think those were your exact words, but that really hit home to me. So I think if we can do option 3, get input from council on how we can spend that 30,000 so that all of our businesses can benefit from this, not just X number of them. So I would hope you would support this option. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Haas.
I guess my question though to Councillor Race, I hear what you're saying, but are you suggesting then that it come to a standing committee for council to discuss this? Because you're directing administration to bring back further information on collaborative, but you're at the same time also suggesting that we as a council discuss different options. So I'm not sure if you want administration to bring back a report. They've already brought us a report. So you're asking them to go back to the drawing board and figure out another option to marketing fund, or are you suggesting that we as a council discuss that?
Councillor Race, you're on mute, ma'am.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we as a council, if we discuss it, when will we discuss it tonight? I think if we can get some of our good ideas, some of the things that Councillor Nelson was referring to, Councillor Waugh, get that to administration. They could bring that back to the table for us. I just don't want to see this go away. I truly don't.
So, okay, so as Mr. Chair, if that's the case, thank you, Councillor Race, for that clarification. I can't support the way it's worded then, because it's not bringing it back to council to have that conversation. For me, we're asking administration to go back and bring back us options for a marketing fund that doesn't involve our conversation. So I guess I'd have to look for different wording of it for personally. That's how I see it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
All
right.
Chair, yeah.
Yes, Councillor Race, one comment, and then we'll keep moving in the queue.
So I'll make this quick. If anyone would like to reword this motion or direction, to make it beneficial, to move this along, I would certainly accept that.
Okay, in the queue, I have Mayor Michaels, Councillor Nelson, and Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was the same, but directed to administration. Just what does this motion or direction mean to them? What would they be providing council? Thank you.
CIO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask a couple of questions for clarification. The motion is to bring back information regarding the collaborative marketing fund and additional options. If council's not interested in that collaborative marketing piece and are looking for other options outside of a collaborative marketing program, to administration, the collaborative marketing program is what we presented. So if there was additional information on that we could bring that could help support that's what that motion means to administration, I would think. If this is something outside of that and maybe a broader term could be used, aside from collaborative marketing fund, community-wide marketing program or something like that, would give us a bit of a broader look at what we could bring forward as far as options to council.
Mayor Michaels, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my follow-up, if I may. Actually, I'm going to wait. I think I support chopping part of that motion in giving that latitude for administration. So I'll listen to the rest of council and go from there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Nelson and then Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be in favor of the motion simply because I want that money to be available when we need it, and we may need it very soon. I know of multiple different larger scale initiatives that are happening in our community that I think may come to council with an ask, one of which was presented last week. There's lots of talk about different ways to market our community. And if council had a chunk of money that could be our portion of that in reserve, ready to go if we need it, that doesn't require budget adjustments and taking from reserves, I think that's the right position to be in for a council. Kind of like we do the grant program for the community grant program. We don't go and say, let's give every nonprofit in the community $300 to do X. We would say, come to us with your ideas and we'll figure out where it's best spent to have the biggest impact on your organization and the community as a whole. So I don't know if we need a separate motion to accomplish that, but I think having this in our reserves is the best position we can be in at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I specifically support this motion on the floor. I guess my question for administration is, one of the things I think is important at this stage of the game is to go out for council to demonstrate leadership, to engage with our business community, especially our small business community who's hurting the most, and to ask them, is this what you want in terms of a mass marketing program? And to get that feedback. Now, if administration has low-hanging fruit that they're ready to bring to the table, I definitely want to hear all the options. But I guess Councillor Race's direction that's on the floor, does it preclude council, and my assumption is no, from taking information and advice and input from our business community, hearing what administration has to say and sort of just determining the best course of action moving forward?
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in not providing any direction tonight to administration, the money will remain in that reserve. And should council have other ideas or need some time to further communicate and engage with the business community to find out the best use of that money, there's no rush, I suppose, in providing that direction tonight. It can be brought forward later on. As well, an additional idea just to put into council's minds as we have this conversation is that we do have that business support, the business resiliency support program. We're not sure how subscribed that program will be and whether a next phase of that into the fall may be necessary as we learn from that process and the businesses that have engaged too. So there's definitely lots of opportunity for the use of that money. Council's uncomfortable providing direction tonight. It doesn't mean that further direction can't be provided later on.
Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, if I may build off of that, Mr.
Absolutely.
Chair. Yeah, I will support the motion on the floor. I think it gives us the latitude to engage right now with our business community. Again, I think this comes down to council demonstrating solid business leadership. We should be out engaging with our local businesses and asking them what they want, what works for them. Administration has got some ideas. I want to hear those, but I think we also have a duty to go out and talk to our businesses, not in determining what we think is best for them, but in hearing from them what's best for them. And again, that is a purely democratic process. And so I think option 3 does provide us with that latitude, and I will be supporting it. I think, again, hearing from the businesses in terms of what they need is always the best route. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. I have Councillor Haas in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that being said, though, I guess, thank you, CEO Olson. I agree with Councillor Magoon that, going out to our business communities and discussing that, and there's nothing stopping administration or us as a council doing it. And, it doesn't require that, as Councillor CEO Olson said, the money will stay in that reserve. It's not going anywhere. So quite frankly, maybe then a motion is not necessary. Our economic development officer, knows that money's there, is going to be in communication with our business communities, and and it's there for when the time comes and we need, or have ideas to then make that direction at the time. So it's not like this money is going to be spent, like as CEO Olson said. Plus, it does give us that opportunity, that $30,000. We don't know what that other program is going to be like, and maybe it might be overdrawn, and we might need more money for that. So, in the way it's worded, unfortunately, we've already looked at a collaborative marketing fund. I think in the different wording needs to be established then, and be more broader if I were to even consider supporting it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I have Councillor Race in queue. You're on mute, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I would be amendable to any councillor to add an amendment. And my suggestion, if I could make it, would be to take out the wording, the collaborative marketing fund for COVID resilient support, and replace it with community-wide marketing program. And I do have to say, by not promoting this motion right now, we are delaying this conversation. We're stopping the conversation. Having this motion, we're going to keep the conversation going. And I'll tell you, this is just my personal opinion. We have a bit of a track record of putting things off, putting them off, kicking them down the road. I don't want this conversation to stop. So that's just how I feel.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recommend a friendly amendment if Councillor Race is amenable. I would like to replace the collaborative marketing fund with a community marketing program. Wording, please.
And Councillor Race, you've already indicated you're amenable to that friendly amendment. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just speak to that, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I just want to wait and see how it plays out in the actual wording.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
Councillor,
if I may.
I just want to double check with Councillor Race to make sure that's amenable to her as written. Councillor Race?
It is, sir, but I'm wondering, should there be a date attached to this?
CEO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There could be a date attached to this to give council some context. To prepare a report that has options for a community marketing program will take some time, as we would just be starting on that now. So this likely wouldn't come before the meeting in July, I would wager. Just to give council some context on that. As well, the community marketing program could include a lot of different options and a lot of different things. And would take some exploration as well to see what other grants and how that money could be leveraged further. Take a look at what other communities are doing. So that all does take some time, and we would be comfortable with a date that gives us a little bit of that flexibility in order to approach this properly and bring council the information they require.
Councillor Race?
So a date just gets it on the action pending list. And without a date, it can still be worked on. Is that correct?
CEO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. Internally, through conversations with administration on something like this, we would determine a date at which to bring it forward and include a date in the action pending list that administration creates, as opposed to a date that's set by council within the motion.
Yeah. And, you know, that would not inhibit us from going out into the community and speaking to everybody we need to speak to. So thank you very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Magoon, and then Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and again, I want to speak directly to Councillor Hawes's concerns. I think it is absolutely essential that this is on the books, as it were, so that we know as a council that it comes back to us. You know, otherwise, I think there is that potential that it, maybe not that it doesn't get forgotten, but it isn't as paramount as it might seem. If it's on the books and we know that there's a date attached, then it's a little bit of the right kind of kick in the butt to get each of us councillors out talking to local business and say, okay, what do you need? What do you want to see from this community? We have $30,000. You know, we've earmarked it for marketing. What would work for you? And then we know that we have a due date, as it were, to bring it back. And then we can hear administration's ideas and put together something that's going to work for the community. I think it is absolutely essential to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question to administration is there a need to have that last part in the motion before it approves the Collaborative Marketing Fund COVID-19 Resilience Support Program for Hinton? Does it have to be there, those 12 words?
CEO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no need to have that. Unless council wishes to have something in the lane of a collaborative marketing fund come forward at a later date for additional discussion. If we're looking at a community marketing program, there's no need to have that last word on there. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Mr. Chair, if I may, I know we try to wing these things on the fly and like kind of change and mold the original direction. I don't know what Councilor Race is comfortable with, whether it's withdrawing this. And then to me, CEO Olson said, we simply just want to report on a community marketing program. That's it. So we want to direct administration to just bring us a report on a community marketing program at a standing committee meeting. That's it. So to me, I don't know if there's appetite to reword this. We'd have to split it or make a couple of friendly amendments, or we could withdraw and just Councilor Race can make that motion if she's comfortable with that. But I just don't want to keep going in circles, right, with this by kind of patching it. That's my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Councillor Race, I think Mayor Michaels brings up a good point. Do we, what is your appetite to withdraw this, or do you want to keep making changes to this motion, or do you want to let it stand as is?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate what Mayor Michaels is saying. I can withdraw and then or request to withdraw and then make another motion. I'm fine with that. But
Okay,
no.
is there,
Sorry.
if that is the case and you're open to withdrawing and starting fresh, then I'll ask council, is there any opposition to withdrawing this motion and starting fresh? Seeing none, then motion withdrawn. Councillor Race.
I'd like to make the direction that committee direct administration to provide further information regarding the community marketing program.
And Wendy, I know you're sharing that in the chat. Sorry, Ms. Anderson, I know you're sharing that in the chat, but is there a way to put that up on the board as well, just so that the public can see it? Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Okay, so we have a fresh direction up on the board. I've going back to the original queue. I have Councillor Nelson and Councillor Haas. Do you wish to speak to this?
Sure, yeah, it hasn't really changed in substance, so not a lot that I'll have to say has changed. Strangely, I won't be supporting this largely because I completely agree with Councillor Magoon. I don't want to send administration on a bit of a wild goose chase trying to figure out what council wants without giving administration direction. And it also creates a timeline that is, potentially long, which is one of the concerns that we have. So I would rather see this come back as a discussion item. I'd have to look at the dates and basically task council to say, hey, let's all go connect with our businesses, come back as a discussion item, specific with in mind, hey, we've got 30 grand, what's the best way to spend it and when? And then from that build what direction we're giving to administration. I had a colleague on a Zoom today that said, I don't like spray and pray. And I feel like that's what we're doing with a motion that just says, administration, go bring us info. I don't want them to bring back something we may not have any interest in supporting. So to me, it's on council to funnel this down a little bit and give better, more constructive leadership to our administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I have Councillor Haas, Councillor Magoon, and Mayor Michaels.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to defer. I think we've had quite a long conversation about this, and I think we're no more further than we were when we started, to be completely honest. I reached out actually, and if I may, I sent an email and all of council received. There is some efforts being made right now to market our community. We're not sure. There's videos being made from care grants, things like that. So there's stuff going on in the background, and I do agree with things being on the books for sure. But I'm of the same mind of Councillor Nelson. Is we are again asking administration to go off and bring us information, and we aren't really directing on exactly what we want. And I guess that's where I'm struggling with this. I want to use this $30,000 effectively, but I also want to have the discussions that so we can move forward. As Councillor Ray said, we want to be able to move forward, and I don't think we we're at that place yet to where we want to use that $30,000 yet. So I'll hear for the other councillors and get, I guess, better insight then too. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Magoon and then Mayor Michaels.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd actually like to propose a relatively simple amendment. Wendy, if I could just, or sorry, Ms. Anderson, if I could just see the, oh, there, I have it on the chat. I would like to amend the existing motion to read that committee direct administration to bring back a discussion item regarding the community marketing program. And if I could speak to the intention of that, Mr. Chair?
Before you do, Councillor Magoon, I just want to check with administration. Is that a proper amendment, or is that a whole new? Or is that a whole new to change the intent of the original direction?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look to Ms. Randall.
I don't think it changes the intent. It's just strengthening the main motion by saying, giving further direction.
Okay. Thank you very much, admin. Councillor Magoon, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, to build off what Councillor Nelson had said, I want to see the timelines on this accelerated. And I agree, we as an organization don't have time to be sending administration off, trying to take care of reports that honestly, I don't think are going to build on our decision-making process. In this case, I think it's simpler for us to go to our business community, ask questions, and bring it back over a shorter time span to discuss the merits of this this idea. It's not that I don't think administration doesn't have anything to offer, and I'm sure that they will have things to offer in that conversation and discussion. But again, I think the bulk of what we're going to need comes from the public and comes from our local businesses. So that's why I proposed this amendment. Again, I still want this to come back to a standing committee. I still want it to be on the community marketing plan. But in this case, I think it's just information that council is better equipped to go and collect. Thank you.
Okay, speaking specifically to the amendment now, I have Mayor Michaels in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to wrap my mind around what's coming first. So we'll have a discussion item. If this is added to the main motion, and then we will get a report or an info item following a discussion item. Is that the understanding that administration has if these were to merge together?
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The understanding that I have is that the information that administration would be providing would be brought forward to council through that discussion item. So so no report, it would be a discussion item in the Councillor Race's motion. It doesn't specify whether it's a report or whether it's information. I was going to ask for clarification prior to the amendment on what exactly administration would be bringing back. But merging this would be that information is now part of that discussion item piece. So administration would be prepared to participate in that discussion. But at this point, there's no mention of a report.
Okay. Mayor Michaels.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm kind of leaning towards not supporting any of this right now. I guess my other question to administration, is there a shorter timeline or turnaround for an information item to come to council so then we can have that discussion instead of a full-blown report? I'm kind of piecing together what a few councillors are saying. They want some information on this, or do they just want a blanket discussion item, which we could just add to the agenda with no information? So yeah, that's, I don't want to convolute this, but this is getting a little messy. So thank you.
So was there a question in there for administration?
My apologies. No question. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilor Magoon, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I don't think this is, I guess I respectfully disagree. I don't think there's really much mess to this at all. I think the question is a matter of timelines. The reason I put this forward is administration indicated that if they brought this forward as an informational report to council, we wouldn't be looking at this until July. That does absolutely nothing to help our businesses going into the summer, nothing. So again, the question is, if we as councillors want to have the political will to try and help our businesses through a tough time, which is now, not the fall, right? And certainly not the winter time, then we have to get some traction going. And if administration says it's not possible to deliver a report before mid-July, then okay, that's fine. Then council should, in my opinion, go out, do their homework, talk to businesses, find out what those businesses need, bring it back and have a discussion on that. And then craft some policy demonstrating leadership. That's my opinion on things. So if administration says that's not possible for them to deliver a report, then we do our homework, we go out and get information, we bring it back and we make a decision. That's what I think is best. And that was my intention for bringing forward that amendment. I don't think it's a matter of mess. I think it's a matter of what's your intention, what's your timelines. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment on the floor? Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I just need some clarification. I thought when Councillor McGowan made that amendment, that his amendment would that council direct administration to bring back a discussion item that would replace administration to provide further information. So your wording would replace some wording in my initial direction. Does that make sense to people?
Again, I guess can I direct this to administration again, just to clarify exactly how this melds together?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, the interpretation that administration has on this is that information is now within that discussion item. So the information that administration is bringing forward will be in an introduction to the discussion item that council is also participating in. So information was broad enough to mean to fit discussion, or as I said before, I was going to seek that clarification as to what information meant. If it was an informational report, if there was a request for decision required. So administration would do some research and bring some information and participate in the discussion with council. Is how that's interpreted. So information is removed and bring back a discussion item is placed.
Okay, so it's as simple as that change if the amendment is adopted?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that in mind, do I have anyone else speaking to the amendment? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If that is the understanding of this, I support this. I want a discussion item. It sounds like we're not getting a discussion item. We're getting an information item coming to council is what I'm kind of understanding. If,
No.
Okay, well, anyways, yeah, procedurally, I still struggle with this. This is such a strange combination of both, but I'll support it because it sounds like we're just going to have a discussion item. So I'll support this. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak to the amendment? Councillor Race.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just need to clarify. When Councillor McGowan made his amendment, Councillor McGowan, did you want specific wording taken out of my direction and then just add those 6 words, which would be bring back a discussion item? Is that the intent of your amendment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Please, Councillor McGowan.
Absolutely, that's the intent. The intent is instead of having an informational report coming to council, for council to have a discussion item.
Yes.
Full stop.
Yep. So basically what Councillor Nelson had suggested many minutes ago, having a discussion item. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna put a halt to any more discussion on the amendment and call it to question. We think we have an understanding from admin how this is going to be incorporated. So if we could please put it up on the board, Ms. Anderson, just so the public's able to read it along with. Thank you. So Magoon Amendment, replace information that committee direct administration to bring back a discussion item regarding the community marketing program.
My apologies.
Okay. That committee direct administration to bring back a discussion item regarding the community marketing program. All those in favor? Sorry, the screen switched just as the vote was called. Can I please get a show of hands again? All those in favor? Okay, that amendment passes unanimous. Ms. Anderson, could you please put up the now amended motion on the board just so we have a complete understanding how this reads? Okay. And that is the amended motion, Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, council, we have an amended motion on the board or direction on the board. Any comments, questions? Councillor Haas.
Just a clarifying question to administration, because it sounded like there may be also some information that administration might be able to share in this conversation, in this discussion, that doesn't preclude that administration can add to the discussion during it, correct? Maybe ideas that our economic development officer may have, administration, but it doesn't preclude that you including or be involved in that conversation, correct?
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the part where council is directing administration to bring back the discussion item, it's inherent in that motion that administration would be participating in that discussion. So just as council will be doing some, pounding of the pavement to find out what the community is interested in, and bringing their own thoughts to the table, administration will take a look and be prepared to participate in the discussion, and to collaborate with council in advance of potentially a report coming out of that discussion.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
So I appreciate that, CEO Olson, because I think administration may have some very valid, information to bring to that discussion, and I just wanted to make sure that isn't going to be, that will be captured in that conversation as well. So I'll be in support of this. I think that, even just having this conversation, business, our community will maybe be reaching out to us and giving us some ideas, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, I have Councillor Nelson in the queue.
I'd like to amend the motion to include the date of June 15th. And if I could speak to it, that's our next standing committee, I believe. So kind of our earliest opportunity to get it. And it still gives us, 4 weeks to go out there and pound the pavement. So I just would like to know what the date is so the community and the business community especially can know when to expect that discussion. Thank you.
CAO Olson, is there any feedback on that date?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No issues with the date.
Okay, so Councillor Race, are you willing to accept that as a friendly amendment?
Certainly, sir.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Race, are you fine with the way that reads?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So council, any other questions or comments regarding the amended direction on the board? If not, I will call the question. Ms. Anderson, if you could put it up on the board again, please.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, just for, thank you. Yeah. That committee direct administration to bring back a discussion item regarding the community marketing program by June 15th, 2021. Show of hands, all those in favor? That passes unanimous. All right. Anything else deriving from this action item, council? Okay. Is everyone good to proceed, or does anyone need a break? No, then let's forge ahead, shall we? Action item number 3, Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee. I throw it over to you, CAO Olson.
Mr. Chair, at the February 2nd, 2021 regular council meeting, council provided direction to administration to bring a terms of reference for a new Beaver Boardwalk committee forward prior to the end of June 2021. The BEBO committee worked to draft the terms of reference that council has received in this report, setting out membership for the oversight committee as well as purpose, objectives, and annual deliverables. The recommended action for this item is to bring the terms of reference and associated bylaw to regular council for decision. Members of the BEBO committee, including Ms. Way and Mr. Von Claveren, can assist in answering any questions of council on this item.
Thank you, CAO Olson. Council, it's over to us. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question is, you could reference page 30 of 74. Under education representative, I have two questions. I'll start with the first. Town of Hinton resident who holds one of the more following qualities, characteristics, or qualifications. Is there a reason why teacher or teacher's aide is identified, but other vocations such as school board trustee, district superintendent, district leadership staff, administrative staff weren't included in that definition?
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look to Ms. Way to maybe provide some additional comments on this. I'll turn it over to her. Thank you, Ms. Way.
Thank you, CEO Olson, through to Councillor Magoon. So when we developed this, the thought was to attempt to represent all of the current and future elements that make up the boardwalk experience. One of those being our interpretive signage, and also we know that many of the school children ranging in ages attend the area to do different class types. So some do labs, some are looking at birds, so forth and so on. So really by having it be at the educator level, but with the teachers, that's our closest link to the direct use of that facility. So any feedback that they would provide, it was the thought that, you know, the teachers would be the best ones to provide that to us, given that they're the ones that take their classes out there. However, if we wanted to expand that to kind of a higher level, we could definitely do that.
Councillor McGoon.
Yeah, that covers that one for now. And then if I could jump back in queue, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let me just check the queue, and yeah, you're back in. And then Councillor Nelson.
You know what, I'll defer to Councillor Nelson just out of courtesy, please.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction to amend the terms of reference to include 2 additional members, including each a youth representative and an Indigenous representative.
I think it's a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McGoon.
On the subsequent page, I would need Wendy to go back to the regular screen for a sec.
I think I can address that, Mr. Chair. I think I'm aware of the point of order.
Okay.
Yeah, so on page 38 of 74, it breaks down the different representatives, and it where I struggle is it forces council to choose between a Whiskey Jack member, historical society, environmental, or Indigenous. And it also requires us to choose between teacher, student, mental health professional, early childhood educator, etc. And I personally don't want to be in a situation where we have to choose between, a chair or president of Whiskey Jack and a local elder. That's not a position I want to be in. And I think both youth and Indigenous are traditionally excluded from many opportunities. And I think we should at least extend that opportunity as much as we can. I know we've talked about youth engagement a lot, and we've taken some strides in that direction. But likely if we have a choice between a teacher and a student, we're going to go with the teacher. So I think it's important to at least open the door and have a space for those. And if the space goes unfilled, then so be it. Thank you.
Okay, administration, any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comments from administration.
Okay. So then we have an amendment on the board. Any comments or questions with regards to that amendment to the terms of reference? Is your point of order satisfied?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate, thanks so much, Councillor Nelson, for that clarification. That makes immense sense. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Race in the queue.
Thank you. Would that put 12 people at the table then, as opposed to 10?
I guess it's your amendment, Councillor Nelson. So is it your intention to add 2 new spots to increase it to 12?
Yeah, it's 2 additional members. So if there are no other changes to be made, it would add those. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anybody else with any comments or questions on this amendment to the terms of reference? Okay, if not, then I will call it to question. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Nelson, to amend terms of reference to include 2 additional members, including each a youth representative and an Indigenous representative. All right, show of hands, all those in favor? That passes unanimous. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make a direction.
Okay.
To amend the terms of reference to include the entire Maxwell Lake and Beaver Boardwalk natural and built environment, as we see in our CS.
I lost that on Maxwell Lake. Mr. Chair, can we request that Councillor Race restate, just so we can catch up?
Absolutely. Councillor Race, could you please repeat your amendment to the terms of reference?
Certainly. To amend the terms of reference to include the entire Maxwell Lake and Beaver Boardwalk natural and built environment.
Okay. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Race?
I do, sir. In regards to the people that I've spoken to, when they think of the Beaver Boardwalk, they think of it as the forest, the hills, the lake, the bridge, the boardwalk. It's all inclusive. It's not the towers, the gravel trails, the connectivity from one boardwalk to another. It's all inclusive. And that's what I would like to see this be. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any comments or questions? CAO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the intent is to eventually to open this up a little bit further, and in speaking with administration, members of the committee, the intention was not to have that the Beaver Boardwalk itself get lost in the first few years in the entirety of that space. I'd look to members of the committee if they had any additional thoughts on that, though.
Committee members? Any thoughts or insight?
Not at the moment.
Mayor.
Putting
Okay.
that together, but I'll speak to something shortly.
Okay. Councillor Nelson?
Councillor Race was my alternate for that meeting, so I do have comments about it in general, but it wouldn't be as a committee member specific to these terms of reference.
Okay. Then anybody from administration who was on the committee that wishes to speak to the original intention and the amendment? Oh, Ms. Way.
Thank you, Chair, through to the remainder of council. The reason that we chose to leave off the entire area at this time is because if you look at the terms of reference and their deliverables and objectives, there's quite a steep climb ahead of this committee. So we really did want to focus the first couple of years on establishing a consistent practice, both as far as receiving briefings from administration and providing feedback to administration and council with respect to capital budget or other maintenance activities in the area. And by expanding it too quickly, too soon, we fear that those deliverables may be lost or delayed as we choose perhaps other areas to focus attention of the committee rather than the boardwalk specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Way. Appreciate it. Anybody on Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question, where would this be changed in the document? I just want to confirm. I may have missed that before, but where exactly would this language be?
Well, I'll direct that to either administration, or if Councillor Race has the specific page that would be amended.
I don't have the specific page, sir.
Ms. Way?
Thank you again, Councillor Waugh. It's likely that there would have to be amendments in a few places throughout the terms of reference, specifically within the purpose statement, and likely within the definitions.
Yes.
And then, of course, all the deliverable sections will have to be revisited as well. Yeah, I think those are probably the main sections there that would need tending to.
Thank you. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was at that meeting. I had some concerns on how to approach this. I want to be able to allow the committee to have an avenue to share concerns with something in the Beaver Boardwalk area so they can come to council. They can give a recommendation. If, let's say we're doing something 40 meters away from the trail that could have an impact, the language in here doesn't really allow them to give a recommendation to council and say, actually, hold on, we have an issue with that. It might be implied to some extent, but to me, this is where I kind of support Councillor Race's proposition here to add this, because it makes it a bit more explicit that it's everything around. I'm also okay adding it potentially in section 2.3 and put a high level description saying, and the committee can recommend any adjacent or any connection to the boardwalk. They can give recommendation. Obviously, I said that extremely poorly there, but the concept is I want that somewhere in the document. That was something that was kind of left out. So I'm on the same page as Councillor Race, whether it's in the purpose or whether it's an actual deliverable. And as I formulate, I'll hand that off to Councillor Waugh. Thank you.
Okay. I'll throw that over to CAO Olson for follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it could very easily fit under 2.3, and that there could be some language that administration could land on that would allow emerging issues in the Maxwell Lake recreation area to be brought forward by the group. So it wouldn't impact the deliverables per se or the purpose at this point, but it would be included under the annual deliverables list. So I guess I contradict myself a little bit there, but I think it could easily fit as a statement under that section 2.3.
Okay. All right, Councillor Race, just because it was your amendment, are you amenable to it being reflected in that particular portion?
I don't know what to say here. I don't want to lose that this oversight committee would be a committee of all of Maxwell Lake. All of Maxwell Lake. They care about the frogs, and the frogs are part of Maxwell Lake. They care about the plant life in the lake. They care about the north hill that's eroding. They're planting juniper bushes to stop erosion. They care about the entire, everybody does. Not one element, not two, but the complete Beaver Boardwalk. So I just don't want to lose the initial intent that this oversight committee takes care of the entire Maxwell Lake and Beaver Boardwalk.
Okay. CEO Olson.
I'll withdraw my question.
Okay. Then next up, Mr. Van Claveren, did you have a?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and then through the council and Councillor Race. So, of course, in the committee, in the group, we talked about the process of having this committee in the long run, and long run is even in a couple of years, taking a more prominent position in anything that has to do with the whole area. So to basically work towards that situation, but focus first on the Beaver Boardwalk because there's a lot deliverables pertaining to the Beaver Boardwalk itself. Of course, we as administration and as Parks Department specifically have with this committee another partner basically that we can reach out for anything that is pertaining to the whole area, as we do right now, of course, when working with, let's say, representative of Whiskey Jacks or anybody else that comes forward to us. So it means that there is an opportunity already to work with this group, even when it's established, focuses first on the Beaver Boardwalk itself. But there is the intent to morph that into the whole area, and basically nothing big will happen basically without consulting and engaging, of course, the community and our stakeholders that we have come to learn better in the past couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Von Clobbern. I have Councillor Nelson up in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I hope I understand what I'm still speaking to. I fully support Councillor Race's, not only the motion itself or the direction itself, but also the spirit that it will cascade through the document. To have the vast array of people that we have potentially on this committee, to have them only be dealing with the structure of a boardwalk, to me is a waste. The Beaver Boardwalk isn't just a series of structures. It's an experience. It's supposed to be immersive. There's an education component. It should be that broader one. And to say you can only do this, but maybe we'll do that, that's what we've struggled with for the last 3 years with the Beaver Boardwalk and with the bridge. And we haven't had that meaningful consultation early. And for us to say as council, we're going to engage with those citizens, because we can always engage with those citizens when we need. That's the reason we're creating this committee, is because we haven't been able to do that at a level that we've been and the community's been happy with. So to me, this committee should absolutely have an invitation to take part in it, and it should be part of their terms of reference. Whether it's, we were talking about signage, as per the terms of reference, they wouldn't be able to have an impact on signage. And to say, well, I guess maybe you can have an impact on that. The terms of reference should be what we want to create, both short-term and long-term, not a short-term one, and then we'll look in a couple of years to, potentially add more things. I think Councillor Race is bang on, and looking forward to support not only that, but how it impacts the entire document and potentially even the title of the document. So thanks for bringing that forward, and I hope Council supports it, because I think that's what's been being asked for a couple of years on this. So thank you.
All right, Councillor Haas, and then Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too appreciate this amendment brought forward. I appreciate, though, administration respecting the fact that there's a lot, involved in the boardwalk. We've got a lot of work that needs to be done there, and trying to focus this committee on the boardwalk is I think, is necessary. But I think that, as Councillor Nelson, the spirit of the committee, to open it up to that whole area. I think obviously the committee is going to prioritize the boardwalk right now, but being able to have input and suggestions for that entire area, I think, is necessary moving forward. And it is something that we as a council has heard from our community and has been lacking. So I'll be in support of this amendment. I think we need to include that all. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to belabor this, but when I think of successful things happening in our community, HIMBA, they are successful because of the passionate people who belong to that organization and really care about the bike park. The disc golf, it is going to be a success because they have people who really care. And our Beaver Boardwalk, I'll tell you, we couldn't get people who cared more than these people do. And we will be working hand in hand with them. We'll be working together. So that's going to be a plus. It's going to be a win for us. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Race. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to highlight the time frame for this coming back. It sounds like there's an appetite to review the oversight committee terms of reference in its entirety to broaden the scope of what this committee would be responsible for. most of, if not all of the annual deliverables are very specific to the Beaver Boardwalk. If there's anything additional that council would like to see regarding the Maxwell Lake Recreation Area in its entirety, I don't know if there's an appetite for the BBO committee to meet once again and talk about this and work through those changes together. I don't want to rush this through and do a search and replace for Beaver Boardwalk and change it to Maxwell Lake without fully considering how to set this group up for success and consider what they would be responsible for in that broader sense.
Okay, thank you, CAO Olson. So are you saying that that might impact the timelines, that this particular amendment might impact the timelines upon which this could return to council?
I would need to confer with administration. I think that there's more to the changes than as I said, just sort of changing out wording. I think we need to consider that broader impact that group would have and take a look at those deliverables and make sure that they speak to the Maxwell Lake recreation area itself as well. So I don't know. I know in the motion we were looking to bring it back June 8th. If dependent on what's required to take a look at the terms of reference and make sure that it makes sense, it's capturing what the will of council is tonight. I'm just not sure, I guess, that it can come back that as amended that quickly.
Thanks for that clarification, CAO Olson. Anyone else with comments or questions with regards to this amendment on the board? Okay, if not, then I will call it to question. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Right, to amend the terms of reference to include the entire Maxwell Lake and Beaver Boardwalk natural and built environment. Okay, all those in favor? Passed unanimously. Anything else, council? Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to seek a direction. And then Wendy, I'll go slow. Just let me know when you're ready. To amend the terms of reference to include medical health professional under education representative. And again, if I could just speak to that briefly, Mr. Chair.
Please do.
Yeah, in going through the document, I certainly think it's a benefit to also note our medical health professionals as well as our mental health professionals under education representatives. Yeah, and I'll just leave that open to council's concern from there.
Okay, so just for clarification, that would be under section 8.4.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Great. Council, any comments or questions on the proposed amendment? Administration, anything? CEO also, no. Okay, with that in mind, I will call a question then. To amend the terms of reference to include medical health professional under education representative. All those, hold on a second. Wait till I can see the hands. All those in favor? That passed unanimously. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction to amend the terms of reference to adjust the meeting frequency to quarterly while still allowing for additional meetings as required. And if I could speak to that, being on this committee and just understanding the nature of things that happen in nature, my feeling is that monthly is going to be too often sometimes, and maybe not enough other times, because of construction schedules. Even just our committee, it was very much in fits and starts. I think as this committee evolves, a monthly meeting could be way too much, but understanding as we get into deliverables, there may be a need for that. But outside of kind of those key deliverable times, I don't think there's a necessity to meet monthly. And I think it could just be burdensome on administration to be coming up with those agendas and doing all of that. But I didn't want to take away the ability to do that when need be, i.e. we get a grant for $300,000 and we need to turn around a recommendation to council in a span of, a month to 6 weeks. So I think it just fits better with what this committee will need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nelson. I guess administration, a lot of us weren't on the committee, so if there's any insight you could provide as to why monthly was recommended, it might help to provide some context to the original intention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll look to Ms. Way or Mr. Bob Cloverin if they have anything to add.
Thanks, CA Olson. A monthly meeting was chosen based on the work ahead for this committee, especially in its first year. And it was also kind of mirroring the frequency of the current Beaver Boardwalk Committee. However, the language that Councillor Nelson has proposed allows flexibility, so that would be absolutely fine.
Thank you very much for that insight, Ms. Way. Council, any comments or questions regarding the amendment on the board? All right, then I'll call it to question. To amend the terms of reference to adjust the meeting frequency to quarterly while still allowing for additional meetings as required. All those in favor? Passed unanimous. All right, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. My question is to administration. What is the difference between an advisory committee and an oversight committee?
CEO Olson.
I'll look to Ms. Way.
Thank you, CA Olson, through the remainder of council. So I would say that one of our advisory committees is CDAC. They engage and then provide specific recommendations to council and advise council on what options may be before them on any particular matter. This oversight committee is mainly intended to ensure that administration and council remain in line with the original vision that was set out by the Beaver Boardwalk Committee. And that is done through the deliverables section. So by attending budget meetings, by contributing to a capital plan for the area, they are providing oversight to the original vision. Thanks.
All right. Councillor Race.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Anything else deriving from this action item, Council? Okay. Oh, Councillor Haas. Got in under the wire.
Yeah, well, I'd like to make the motion or direction option 1, but before I do, I'd like to get CL Olson's perspective on that June 8th date. Originally, due to your comments prior to the change in, the potentially the scope, is June 8th still a reasonable date to shoot for, or is administration wanting maybe a little bit more time before, I potentially make this motion or direction?
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer that question, erring on the side of caution in allowing for additional time if it's required, to bring this forward to July 6th instead, would be beneficial to administration as we take a look at the terms of reference and make sure that the changes are all incorporated. And as well, reach out to the BBO committee and see if there's any further input to some of these pieces coming forward to council tonight as well. So July 6th, if we can get it sooner and it can be pulled together in an appropriate way and brought forward sooner, we absolutely will do so, but appreciate the flexibility in that timeline.
Okay, and if I may, just to follow up with that is, we've been waiting a long time for this, and I don't foresee any disruption waiting a little bit longer to make sure we get this right, and making sure that, the amendment to the scope of the area be captured in all of the terms of reference. And I appreciate the fact that the BBO committee, have an opportunity to also consult with and have that conversation. So if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the committee direct administration to bring the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee terms of reference and associated bylaw number 1158 to the July 6th, 2021 regular council meeting for decision.
Okay.
And if I can speak to it.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the amendments. I think it really, highlights a lot of adding, the additional scope. I think the community members says that's what they're looking for, and I appreciate the other amendments as well. So, but I think this is a great step forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final on July 6th. Thank you.
One question for administration on the direction on the board. Should that read terms of reference as amended?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It can. Sure. As amended would be appreciated.
Okay, as amended. Thank you, Councillor Waugh, for pointing that out. Thank you.
All right. Any comments or questions from council with regards to the direction on the floor? Seeing none, I will call it to question. That committee direct administration to bring the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee terms of reference as amended and associated bylaw 1158 to the July 6, 2021 regular council meeting for decision. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you, administration, for all your work on that and the BBO committee. All right. Anything else stemming from this council? Oh, Councillor Haas.
Not on this, but could I ask for a point of privilege, please?
Okay, we will come back at 6:10. All right.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, and welcome back to the May 18th, 2021 Standing Committee meeting. I'll call it back to order. And next up on the agenda is information items, and I'll pass it over to Mayor Michaels for a Seniors Week proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We recognize that seniors have made and continue to make many contributions to strengthen our province, our towns, our communities, and our daily lives. And seniors are a vital part of our families, giving generously of their wisdom, experience, and love. And more seniors are independent and active. And by challenging these stereotypes of aging, are leading the way for future seniors. And a more positive attitude towards aging is creating new opportunities for new seniors. We must honor seniors for their skills, knowledge, experience, and leadership. It is appropriate that a special week be set aside to celebrate with seniors. Therefore, be it resolved that on behalf of Town Council of the Town of Hinton, that I, Mayor Marcel Michaels, do hereby proclaim the week of June 7th to the 13th of 2021 to be Seniors Week. I call upon everyone in our community and our area to join in a celebration of Seniors Week and recognize the valuable contribution of seniors. As we know, our community is one of the best when it comes to seniors. Our volunteer shortage is directly tied to seniors because they carry the huge bulk of volunteering and giving back to the community. So for many reasons, they are an extremely important part of our community. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to read this proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, and Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, as a senior citizen councillor, I would like to thank you for your kind words, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Race. And moving forward, we have a short-term rental workshop, and I will turn it over to administration and CAO Olson to kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council has discussed the impacts and considerations of short-term rentals in Hinton previously, receiving information items on how other communities are managing the increase in this type of accommodation. To facilitate a discussion with council tonight, Mr. Rousseau has prepared a brief slide deck to provide some additional information and support evaluation of options the council has in front of them before determining potential next steps. Tonight, we're really looking for some conversation to support council's discussion in the areas of concern or the information that council is requiring to determine any steps moving forward. The short-term rentals workshop is being held within the standing committee meeting for that reason. Should there be some direction that comes out of the discussion tonight to bring a report forward or something like that, council does have that latitude to do that, whereas other times in workshops, they are strictly for discussion and no decisions are being considered at that time. So it's a little bit different, but wanted to provide that latitude to council because I know it's a pressing issue for council and we've had previous discussions. So at this point, I will turn things over to Mr. Rousseau to take us through the slide deck and then over to council for a discussion.
Thank you, CA Olson, and through the chair to council, it's my privilege to have prepared the slide deck for you. And it's been a very interesting journey, I would say, what I discovered. And as Ms. Olson has outlined, that this is a workshop. So stop me at any time if you need clarity or if you need me to go back, and we would then sum it up. So just how I went about this whole strategy for the workshop was it's got to be very interactive. Council should feel free to own anything that you want to bring to the table. What I've done was, it's of course comes from the January the 19th meeting that council had in your directed administration to bring back this workshop so that you can better understand or get a grip of what your options are. I think it's also further to the Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association that was a delegation at your January the 19th that sparked this the requirement to have a discussion. And so I'll give you a bit of background. I'll walk you through a few examples of what has been done so far in Alberta, as well as in BC, Kelowna to be specific. And then we will look at some low-hanging fruits that we have. We'll look at some legislation. I will make sure that you have enough information to give us direction what you'd like to see us maybe narrow down for you. So with no further ado, I would get into, I referred to the January the 19th MD 2169 that prompted this discussion. And so here we are tonight because this was deferred at our last council meeting to come back to this meeting this evening. So what is our purpose? So the purpose is, it stems from, as I already said, from the Alberta Hotel and Lodging Association. That was a delegation at the January the 19th meeting, 2021. And what they stressed in that meeting was they wanted to see a level playing field, to use their own words, and to strive toward creating regulations that would govern the short-term rental, or the STR, as I sometimes call it. We also want to discuss and evaluate the opportunities and the challenges that an STR can bring, and how can we balance these factors against the current regulated accommodation providers that are already existing in the town of Hinton. And then thirdly, we want to talk to council about setting a timeline, as Ms. Olson has outlined, to possibly bring back a narrowed down approach to what you're going to discuss tonight and what you're hearing this evening. Could it be in the form of a draft guideline? Could it be a bylaw? Or could it simply be a report that you're wanting to hear back from what the discussions were tonight? So it's really open-ended, and it's up to council how you want to craft this going forward. So as I said, a little bit of background and an overview to short-term rentals. The Town of Hinton's current land use bylaw, as we often call it, LUB 1088, contains no regulations regarding short-term rentals. The LUB does address bed and breakfast operations as a home-based business. The Town of Hinton currently has, at the time when this was written, 70 Airbnbs and 9 VRBO listings. The Town of Hinton zoning bylaw does not support, nor does it address SDRs, short-term rentals. The current SDR operators do not operate under Town of Hinton issued business license. We require a vision on how the SDR should be regulated in the Town of Hinton. Now, when I say vision, I don't mean that we need to go to craft and say what it should look like. We should basically say, how do we want to see SDRs grow and be managed, and maybe to a lesser extent control and create that parity with the Hotel and Lodging Association's comments that was listed on January the 19th. Just as a point of reference for council, Banff, the town of Banff and Jasper, there's no specific guideline like other municipalities has, because as you know, that they are guided by Parks Canada regulations on both their short and long-term rentals. So as a result of that fact that I've just mentioned, I've looked at comparators such as the town of Cochrane, city of Calgary, city of Edmonton, and then one outside our province, which is the city of Kelowna. And there's a reason why I included the city of Kelowna, because they kind of had a beautiful guideline that makes it really easy as a reference for anyone that wants to start up a SDR, or anyone who has an SDR, that they could actually, that the municipality can be very helpful in that regard. So why regulate? And regulate is a strong word, but let's just say why formulate some rules around the SDR concept? I think it's important that we do have a framework or a guide or a policy coming forward. This is to ensure that the operations align with council endorsed visions and principles. And these may include a possible limit of how many SDRs you want to see in your town. You may want to put a cap on it. And when I say cap on it, I say you may. Operators must register with the Town of Hinton and apply for a business license. This just allows equity, and this helps us to have a better tracking ability as well as to how many of these SDRs we have currently operating at a given time in our town. Provincial requirements for SDRs as of April 1st, 2021. They levied a tourism levy on the SDR when purchased through the online marketing places. So this is brand new and it's just been coined. So that is a requirement going forward from the province. The operator must or may live in the home, and you'll see more of these examples come through when we look at Calgary as well as Edmonton, how they look at who lives and what period of time you live in your home. That's also part of an SDR concept. You can, some municipalities, I've seen one of them, I think it was Calgary or Edmonton, that you need to obtain a good neighbor responsibility agreement. So what this really means is that if Winston wants to create an SDR where he lives, he needs to talk to his neighbors, and there's a template that he will share with them as to what he will abide by should he operate and get the license to have an SDR. Parking requirements are paramount, as some bylaws in certain cities require on-street parking to be limited to 72 hours before a vehicle must be moved. So this is where that is coming from. Should the parties who are renting out a room or two have people staying in greater time than 72 hours, then that parking will have to be on the street itself. Compliance with health and safety and fire code requirements. I think this is a very important bullet to remember, council, as we go through this conversation tonight, that if we don't have some checks and balances in place for safety, fire code, that we actually put ourselves at risk as well as the homeowners at risk, not being informed accordingly. And then something of note, maybe not super important, we don't think about this always, but certain cities or towns have garbage and recyclable protocols. And what are those protocols that we would like to see as well, so that we don't have an additional issue with garbage and the collection and the separation of recyclables and those type of things. So moving right into one of the examples, I use this, the town of Canmore, because they have a very interesting concept. And this is the only town that I could glean from that has got the tourist home concept. So just to fill you in a little bit about what they do, is that their SDRs falls under the definition of a tourist home. So it's basically a dwelling that you can use as a permanent residence or a short-term stay. Now, the formal definition of a tourism home is a dwelling unit operated as a temporary place to stay, with or without compensation, and includes all vacation rentals of a dwelling unit. Now, the characteristics of it can be distinguished as a tourist home from a dwelling unit used as a residence may include any of the following: the intent of the occupant to stay for a short-term vacation purpose, rather than use the property as a residence, and or the commercial nature of a tourist home, and or the management or advertising of the dwelling unit as a tourist home or vacation rental on websites such as Airbnb or the VRBO, and or the use of a system of reservations, deposits, confirmations, credit cards, or other forms of electronic payment. They do allow for stays, consecutive days of greater than 30 days. And I think this was also something that was brought up in a former conversation with our council, that, you know, what is the stipulation? Do we want to be prescriptive about the 30 days, consecutive days, or do we want to open that up? And so this was one of the key things that I found of interest. So council wants to bear that in mind as we go into further conversation in this evening.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you very much. I guess if we could go back to that previous slide, slide 7, was there any, I guess the only one I'm confused by is that it says that a tourist home includes, let's see here, may be used as a residence, may include any of the following. And then the last bullet says allows for greater than 30-day consecutive stays. So then how does the town of Canmore differentiate between a traditional rental home, you know, say I rent my home for 6 months or a year to a family versus, you know, a true tourist home? Was there any indication of how they differentiate that, or do they?
Through the chair to Councillor Magoon, they did not differentiate that, Councillor Magoon. My nudge is that this goes into the business license application. That's my nudge, but I have to confirm that.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. The towns, so still with the town of Canmore, the town's land use bylaw identifies certain zones where tourist homes may or may not be allowed to operate. And we'll get into that as on the next slide, please. So tourist homes, where are tourist homes allowed? So this is the unique sort of angle and perspective that the town of Canmore is taking. So few residential districts allow tourist homes. However, they are permitted or discretionary use in almost all of commercial and mixed use districts. So the town's land use bylaw should identify zones where tourist homes may or may not be allowed to operate. So that's a key differentiator for them. Whereas we in the town of Hinton, we don't have that. We have it as just in the residential area as the need dictates. Furthermore, in Canmore, an owner of a tourist home may use it for short or long-term rentals if they have a development permit to operate it as a tourist home. So that's the key there. They need a development permit. Typically, you would only use a development permit when you're doing structural changes to your home. Furthermore, as a permanent resident, it is used for rentals. The owner pays a higher property tax. So there's the other part, because it's no longer under residential, but because they have it as in a commercial district or in a mixed use district, of which they have different taxation formulas to determine that tax rate. Where are the tourist homes not allowed? Tourist homes are currently prohibited in a vast majority of residential districts in the town of Canmore, as tourist homes have an impact on the availability and affordability of housing for residents, as well as the character of the neighborhood. So this is also a key factor if you want to ensure you've got enough homes in the market for the general public to purchase as a home, as a family stay. I'm realizing that Canmore is a holiday destination, but if Hinton becomes that, that would be a key factor to consider. Is there a question? Councillor Haas.
Yeah, so where are they allowed? If they're not allowed in residential, where do they specify in the town of Canmore where short-term rental can be?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Haas and the rest of council, what I've gleaned from, again, it's not very clear, but it's in a commercial district. So they have different districts, like you'd have a residential area or a commercial area. So they've got certain ring fence, certain areas where they could actually accommodate that in a commercial district. Now, what the commercial district looks like, is it a house combination with an office? That's what I'm surmising it is. And that's just my personal interpretation, how they've done it.
Okay, because yeah, that would be go to commercial. Commercial, I think of stores, I think of, industry, I think of other things. I don't think of, something that accommodated. So that's okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So let's look at the city of Calgary, which is closer to home. Their approach of a definition of a short-term rental is defined as a business of providing a temporary accommodation to get compensation in a dwelling unit or a portion of that dwelling unit for a period up to 30 consecutive days. Businesses that have been issued a permit for a bed and breakfast are not classified as a short-term rental. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Continuing with the city of Calgary, when we're talking business licensing and the cost thereof, this is just a quick summary out of the bylaws and the terms of reference. As of February the 1st, 2020, the business license bylaw included a two-tiered business license category for short-term rentals. All hosts must have a separate short-term business license for each property they rent out. So if I own 2 properties in Calgary and I rent out each of those properties as a short-term rental, I have to take out 2 licenses. So this tier 1 would mean if I have 1 to 4 rooms that are offered for rent, then I pay $100 per property. If I have on tier 2, 5 or more rooms, it's $172 per property, plus the cost of a fire inspection, which they charge $104 per property. So just to reiterate tier 2, once you start renting out more than 4 rooms, you pay a higher premium for your business license, but there's an additional inspection for fire and I would imagine safety as well that is undertaken either by the city of Calgary or an outside party that they contract to do this inspection and then get the sign off before you can actually operate. So that was an interesting component, because going back to my initial comment to the start of this presentation, Council, that I would deem safety and inspections for fire and code. And you'll see in the following slides that I do talk about a link that they look at the Alberta Health and Safety Code to become part of this activity of a short-term rental. Next slide, please, Ms. Anderson. That's the slide I was just alluding to, Council, that with the city of now this is a bit hard to read on the screen. I'll just walk you through some of the regulation types. One of it is egress, especially when you're talking about if you're in some of the short-term rentals in Calgary are in a high-rise or in an apartment building. But the same requirement would be there for us if we do it locally, that you need to have the same egress requirements that subscribe to Alberta safety codes and fire code. So that would be a very important part of our consideration should we land with a bylaw or a regulation or a guideline for STRs within our locations. The maximum number of guests, again, would be conducted through the Safety Codes Act regulation in Alberta as well. Then there's something about overlapping bookings that you cannot take more than, so for argument's sake, if you have 3 rooms that you typically can rent out, that is not 3 different households that is coming to that. So you can only do it in segments of 1 family per visit, so to speak, because I think that speaks to the idea of parking and noise limitation. That's why that overlapping bookings was part of the criteria for Calgary. Advertising, a host must include the business license number in all the advertising for the short-term rental. I think this is a very good addition if we go down this road, because whoever is going to be booking this room or location have an understanding that this is a licensed entity and it's recognized and it complies with all of the above requirements for safety, as well as understanding that it's legit. And then just to have an emergency contact as part of the regulations as well that the owner must provide. City of Edmonton, this is the model that should, if I may be as bold to say that when I was speaking to quite a few people, that if council ever is going to adopt regulations, that the City of Edmonton's ones were more flexible, they were more representative of what's happening today. But I'll just walk council through this, and it's your purview to, of course, blend in what you feel is good at the end of the day. So the business model for short-term rentals for Edmonton is usually one of 2 types. 1, a rental of an entire dwelling. 2, a rental of an individual room or a space in your home where the host can live. Now, in many cases, the short-term rentals are listed on multiple websites and operated by the property owner or a tenant for that matter. Transactions for short-term residential rental accommodations are usually completed through online platforms, as I said earlier, on Airbnb, VRBOs, HomeAways, and the FlipKey concepts and platforms. So the licensing with the City of Edmonton is somewhat less compared to most of the examples that I've highlighted to date. So the SDR license fee would be $94 as we speak. I don't know if they had an increase in 2021. I'm working on 2020 numbers. A development permit for a major home-based business is required, as I mentioned early on, because you're renting out more than 1 or 2 sleeping units. So there will be an inspection and there will be a development permit issued. Building permit may be required if there are changes to the physical floor plan, meaning if I remove a structural wall, or I intend to do that, or I intend to open up the space more, you need a BP for that building permit. It provides guests with an information for guest guide. This is a really good opportunity for guests that when they apply for a room, they can actually go, well, not for a room, but when they want to look at the City of Edmonton's requirements for short-term rentals, there's a lovely guide from what's Edmonton about, what's the safety, what's the crime stats, all those type of things. So that's a handy little document to have. And then comply with Alberta Health Services. Alberta Health Services may follow up with the operator to ensure compliance with health regulations. So it's incumbent upon, in this case, the operator to reach out to Alberta Health Services as part of prescription by the City of Edmonton. So when we look at the City of Edmonton regulations, just to give council some more tools in your toolbox to consider, the streets are a shared resource for all Edmontonians, guests alike, as well as residents. Vehicles can be parked and must move every 72 hours and obey all the traffic signage, meaning you can't park in front of a hydrant, for argument's sake. Garbage collection, you shall place your recyclables, items such as paper, cardboard, tins, cans, glass, etc., in a blue bag or a blue bin. So these are just what must be done in terms of the garbage requirements. Noise, not to make noise that disturbs the neighbors, for example, by shouting or playing loud music, especially after 10 p.m. So they have a 10 p.m. curfew. And sounds must not exceed 65 decibels or between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. And of interest is there was no reference made to a 30-day consecutive period of rental. So it seems open-ended to my interpretation that it could be 30 days or more, or it could be 30 days or less, but there's no prescription when it comes to consecutive periods. So going outside our province into the city of Kelowna in BC, what I did like about them, and hence I included them, and it was also very representative of our times, is that it clearly states the SDR eligibility requirements. So for argument's sake, if Winston wants to open up a short-term rental at his home, I can go onto the website of the city of Kelowna and I can go and look at their operator's guidebook. And as you would see that this operator's guidebook gives you everything from parking spaces, parking configuration, cost of the business license, and areas where you can actually operate comfortably to have an SDR. So it gives you the steps to obtaining a business license, the business license application fee structure. They have a two-tiered as well. If it's your principal residence, it's $345. So that's quite more, it's the highest I've seen. Maybe it's because it's Kelowna. And non-principal residence, if you don't live in it, $750. So it basically almost doubles. Parking requirements and stall sizes are all outlined on this eligibility requirements on the short-term operator's guidebook. Very clear on safety, as well as an evacuation plan that needs to be provided, depends on the house configuration. And then they talk about the compliance requirements, and they also talk about the fines or the sanctions that they will levy if you do not comply. Now, these could be fines or sanctions for the operator, as well as for the residents itself if they don't abide, of course, to regular traffic management requirements. Councillor Haas, do you have a question?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, and I guess the question, a lot of, with compliance and, fire safety, all those things. So out of curiosity, did these communities increase enforcement when they did impose these regulations? Because that's something that's come up in the past in conversations that, our current protective services potentially may not have the capability to enforce this. So did other communities increase their capabilities?
Through to the chair, to Councillor House, I will stand to be corrected. I can say that they had to step up because of these regulations, and most of it was complaint-based from what I understand, that their CPOs or their bylaw officers would react to it. So for argument's sake, a neighbor would call in and say that, you're a business operating, are you aware of it? And then the CPO or the bylaw officer would investigate and then make sure that that is taken care of. I think out of the gate, there's a level of trust that we have, or that the communities had with their operators. They had problems with unauthorized SDRs, but that was soon cleaned up. It doesn't mean the problem is totally solved, but the community worked together to help to raise that banner of complaints. I think there will be a element of having to step up your enforcement, but I think if we start with a complaint-based approach and also a trust component amongst our residents, then you should have the desired outcome.
Okay. And if I may, so then the fire safety regulations, evacuation plans, all of those things, they have to provide that in their application or business license, or does it require someone to go out and investigate that what is on paper is actual? Like, would that fall in if we were to go that route in our community, would that fall in our fire department, or how does other communities work that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Haas. Through to the chair, to Councillor Haas. What other communities are doing, it's normally at the point of application for your business license, especially if you're a new operator. They may have a clause in there that every 2 or 3 years that you have to submit it again when you renew your business license. And then there may also be spot on-site checks that can be done by a bylaw officer or a CPO. What I'm seeing is that it's more with a business license application that those conditions needs to be satisfied if it's a new SDR.
Okay, thank you.
Just continuing with the guiding principles here and consideration. Steps to obtaining a license, as I said, the business application fee structures all in that guideline and operators guide, parking stall requirements, and then of course the zoning for consideration for arguments like tourist, commercial, rural, and single residential. These are details that we have to sort out. I don't think it would be as onerous for Hinton, but I don't want to speak ahead of myself, but I just thought I'd put that in there, that zoning categories may come in if you're looking at more or less a Canmore example or a hybrid of the two. Next, please, Ms. Anderson. So this slide, council, is intended just for additional consideration. I know it's a lot of information to absorb, but just to bring back a few concepts or ideas for further conversation. Now, the town of Hinton's vision, as I said, for the SDRs and how it should be regulated. So how would council want to create a level playing field, as I said early on? And what would you like to do to encourage people to be, open to an SDR? I mean, I was talking to a few people as I was preparing this presentation, and they said, the whole concept of an SDR is where people can actually learn from the locals. They're in their home, they're actually learning about the culture. They're learning, it's almost like an exchange student coming from another country. And if I'm coming out of maybe, let's say, out of BC and I'm staying in someone's home, I can learn more about Hinton to tell me where the best places are to shop and to enjoy a drink or two or to go mountain biking. So that's kind of part of our vision we want to include, that we want to be open to those type of concepts where we create a communal effect within our residential areas, but also regulating it so that there's a level playing field, that everybody gets a fair shake at things. So that's the intent of that. Undertaking a revised inventory of our SDRs, we need to understand what do we have currently, who has a business license, who doesn't have a business license. So a little bit of backtracking and a little bit of maybe visits to these areas, or encouraging these people to talk to administration and council to get a better understanding where they're at and how they're operating. And this is a long shot, but I thought I'd throw it in there that we grandfather the current SDR subject to compliance with, of course, the various regulations for safety and all of that. So if there's any, I don't use the word shortcomings, but already practices that is within our guidelines, that council would be open for that leverage to be there, that they can be grandfathered in as certain regulations may be stepped up. We could establish districts where SDRs are permitted with a possible cap on SDRs, and it can be subject to a 3-year review period. So for argument's sake, what I'm saying is that if we feel, and I'm just spitballing, that the town of Hinton is seeing a proliferation of SDRs, that you may want to limit the areas where an SDR can be accommodated and a license be granted, and that it's subject to review. Doesn't mean it's an infinity approach to your SDR. So if you have one contravention and you have a second, that maybe by the third time you could be shut down, or after 3 years we've had growth so phenomenal in SDRs that you may want to start limiting, or give everybody an opportunity to start having an SDR. If I don't have it in my first 3 years, maybe my neighbor gets it in the next 3 years. So those are some of the thinking behind that. Third bullet, fourth bullet. We can determine a tax rate to be equitable with other accommodation providers. So this is that leveling of the playing field, commercial versus residential tax structure. This will take a bit more thought to be able to get to this, if this is the appetite and the will of council to wanting to consider something equitable in terms of taxation on the property itself. We could look at, do we want to stay with a 30-day consecutive cap, or is it open-ended like Edmonton has got? And the SDR license fee, what does that structure look like? Do we have one fee fits all, or do we have a tier 1, tier 2 approach like the other municipalities have? This is all up for discussion. So what are the possibilities for the town of Hinton? To draft maybe a bylaw at the end of the day. I think this is where we will get to. We will need a bylaw so we can enforce and we can have enforceability powers. So before we go down a bylaw consideration, we could have a frequently asked questions section on the town of Hinton as it pertains to SDR. So anyone that wants to know how many do we have in our town, what is the caliber, what is the ratings, what can I do if I want to open up my own SDR, then the FAQ can help in that regard. So it can help potential visitors, can help potential SDR owners, and it can just help the general public to know how does the SDR come into being. Allowance for enforcement, compliance, and fines, sanctions. That can also be in the draft bylaw for consideration. We could research a tourist home concept. I'm not recommending it fully, but I'm just throwing it out there for bigger conversations, that a tourist home as an SDR is very flexible. The type of use where the property can be rented out for short-term or quasi-commercial use or lived in permanently as a residence. The lower residential tax rate is reserved for owner-occupied properties, whereas owners have declared the property as their primary residence, and that will not be rented out. So these are just some things that we can use as whetting our appetite for further conversations as the bylaw draft comes back, and what you'd like to see as a consideration and to be outlined in that bylaw. Next, please, Ms. Anderson. So what are some of the takeaways that we can take with us tonight and discuss further? We can ensure that the intent and the vision of council is clearly articulated through this workshop and subsequent review of the documentation that administration will be bringing back based on your desire. Develop a town of Hinton guideline operators guidebook, similar to what Kelowna has done. It's really picturesque. We can showcase our town, good pictures on it, yet informative, yet easy to read. Draft a bylaw parameters that is based on outcome of key workshop recommendations. These parameters may include, but not limited to, guiding principles for the bylaw, potential cap, and unauthorized rentals, licensing, enforcement, good neighborliness, ensure the SDR acts as a catalyst for economic enhancements to the town of Hinton, parking, safety, to mention but a few. Then what is the timing to prepare a town of Hinton guideline operation guide? I mean, that's a conversation we need to have if we want to go that direction. And then the timing to bring back, maybe not a draft, but maybe a report based on what council is going to discuss this evening, in order for us to bring a report that accurately captures what was discussed and what was taking us into a specific direction to get to the bylaw and the guide and the operators and the lodges concept idea that I've mentioned. And I think that is the last slide, Ms. Anderson. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll hand it back to you, and we'll be open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Council. Councillor Nelson.
Yes, nobody's in queue. For me, I think simplicity is key. I think a simple vision around, STRs being embraced as a positive contributing entity to the community is a good start. And that encompasses a lot. I think a lot of the short-term rentals are kind of operating in this weird, like, should I, shouldn't I? So creating clarity, I think, would be huge. To me, first step is the business license part with proof of insurance. And that allows us to collect the data to understand how many we have, where they're concentrated. I have those concerns too, where if one neighborhood becomes the short-term rental neighborhood, what that does to the existing housing stock. So once we have the data, understanding how we want to regulate that, whether that's percentage per neighborhood or only certain neighborhoods. But to me, we're in a really good spot if we want to move forward with this, simply because we have some and lots of interest, but not so many that it's a problem that we have to solve. It's an opportunity we have to do something. That said, council's kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. To me tonight, I want to see us either commit to moving forward in a structured way, or just say, you know what, let's leave it for the next group. Let's see if it's something that people are talking about during the election and address it at that point. Going back and forth on this, I just don't want to create extra work for administration unless this is something we're certain we want to move forward with. So Thanks for that presentation. I've really enjoyed a lot of the considerations within it.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, administration. Yeah, really enjoyed, the information shared with us. A couple of things. I think too. I think moving forward with this, and the business license is a good way to start. I think it also, if I may, and this is a question may or may not administration can answer, but I mean, I've had some really good conversations with some people in our community, and it is a great opportunity. I don't want to restrict this too much, but I think it is important to have some regulation around it. One of the things, considering factors that I thought of and had this conversation is currently, if we take COVID, for example, currently under the restrictions with no regulation, every Airbnb potentially is contravenes the restrictions potentially at this point, right? I mean, I can't have my, in-laws in my house overnight currently right now, the way the restrictions are. And we've got a number of people. So having a regulation right now actually might, assist the Airbnbs or these short-term rentals in that case alone. Is that not the case?
Administration, CAO Olson.
Because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of depends on the nature of the improved accommodation, whether it is co-sharing, where there's a room for rent within a family or a individual's home. I haven't heard too much research this too much, and I'm not sure, Mr. Russo, if this came up in any of the research that you did as being a key consideration.
Yeah, thank you, CA Olson, through to the chair. What I've researched is that if you have a separation of, let's say, separate entrance, like I know some of the SDRs has a separate entrance, then the fact of two families from separate locations coming together is a no-no. But if you have that separate entrance and your interaction is minimal, then I think you're okay. But we will always fall under provincial guidelines when it comes to a COVID situation. So I think that would have to be up to, when they have a separate arrangement, up to the operator as what his or their comfort level is to allow people into their residence, so to speak. But yeah. I haven't heard, yeah.
I just, because I'm familiar with some Airbnbs that, or short-term rentals where the family is in the home and they're bringing in outside people, without that, what you're saying. So I'm just saying that currently under the restricted, a licensed hotel can have people in it. This gives an opportunity where, in this case, short-term rentals would be I guess, legal per se, because if we were to go down this route, I guess the other thing would be helpful is I've done a little bit of research in looking at our current Airbnbs and short-term rentals, and this would also assist, because one of the concerns I had, there was a lot of townhouses and bungalows that are currently as short-term rentals, but there's specifically 6 apartments that have short-term rentals being offered, and this potentially would have been, because I mean, apartments are sometimes hard to find for some people, but that would potentially, having these could I guess police that possibly, right? Because I'm looking at currently that I found 6, which was 26 actual beds that are apartments in a building, where we could then regulate things like that to not tie up, a full apartment with being a short-term rental potentially. So I think there's some benefits there, but still to allow those homeowners that want to invest in their properties and do that. So I'm hoping that council, that we, with this discussion, I'd like to see some movement forward on this too, if we're going to. So I'm interested to hear what the rest of council thinks. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Mayor Michaels.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask Councillor Haas's question. I thought he was leading up to that. What are the rules for apartments in some of these other areas? Like, what's the administration's insight on what municipalities do for apartment buildings.
Administration?
Yeah, thank you, CEO Olson, through the chair. Mayor Michaels, well, what I know Calgary just touched on it very briefly, that they do permit it as an SDR, hence the fire code that has to subscribe to that. I don't know what Canmore and others, I haven't seen anything to that effect, but it is a question that we can ask in terms of how is that regulated for apartments, because one thing that I do know, just to build on Councillor Haas's question and comment, was that, you know, you sometimes have out of province owners that owns an apartment in Hinton per se, and that they may come once or twice, and that is residential suites that is taken up for others that could have used it. So how do we regulate that without being too stifling, not to wanting to allow a free market process as well?
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you. I'll look forward to that information. To me, apartments could play a big role in this in the future. There are many families who struggle to get apartments at a reasonable price. I have the same issue with certain dwellings in our community. So to me, again, I'm struggling a little bit about where we want to go maybe tonight regarding this, but business license insurance is really important for me. Another sticking point a bit is it should be your principal residence only. That to me is really important. I'm already starting to talk to, hearing from realtors that many people from Edmonton are looking to buy properties just to Airbnb out in our community. And like I said, that's only from a few realtors in town, but I'm sure it's somewhat accurate at the very least. So to me, as much as STRs, you know, have an element of goodness, they bring a lot of issues. To me, I'm kind of in the middle to a little bit harder rules in order to relegate you know, rentals in our community, because it's a major issue. You can essentially can't get anything for under $1,700 bucks a month, you know, for a home. So and it goes well into 2000. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I had a question, and that was any of the towns or cities that you researched, Mr. Russo, was there any distinction made between local ownership of a short-term rental as opposed to out-of-town ownership?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was no differentiation between the two that I could pick up. Nowhere near was it mentioned. So I think it's open-ended at this point for most of them.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess one more question. Is it somewhat common to have a maximum amount of permits within a municipality? And I ask that obviously, you know, this is probably more medium to long term, but we have 2,500 to 3,000 dwellings in our community. Is maybe an approach of maxima or limiting how many permits in our community? Any insight on what other municipalities are doing for the total amount of permits set out?
Through the chair again to councillors and Mayor Michaels, I haven't seen explicit cap put on it. That's why I mentioned that we could look at it. I think what happens is that as you see the growth of SDRs happening, so, you know, to the realtor's point that if there's more people just coming for SDRs in Hinton, that's probably where we will want to put a cap on and have a differentiation about staying in your home so that we can make sure that Hintonites do get the benefit of that. That is not a seasonal thing. But I think once the volume grows, you may want to have that ability to cap.
Mayor Michaels. Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Haas in the queue, and did I see your hand as well, Councillor Magoon? Okay, sorry, then Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in the comment, I also reached out to a few realtors, and they definitely do see the benefit too. Some people are actually, you know, it's enticing to have that potential, you know, STR within their dwelling. So there's some benefits, I think, great but again, these are people that are purchasing their homes to subsidize, their mortgage and things like that. And I agree that I think, we have to be mindful of those that are purchasing homes only for the purposes of STRs and exploring that with that cap. I do have a question though, specifically, and maybe you can answer it or not, but I was interested in the good neighborhood responsibilities, having to go to your neighbors. How does that work? Like if I was a neighbor and I said, no, I don't want an Airbnb beside me. Let's say, like, do you have to have permission from your neighbor in order to have it to move forward? Or is it just a courtesy that, hey, we're going to be doing this and we agree upon this? And then basically, if you got any problems with it, you call enforcement. Is that how they work? Like, how does that?
It's a great question. Mr. Rousseau?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Haas. Yes. So it's not that they could turn them down. Maybe there could be some additional comments that comes out of it that can help the desired options to go forward. For argument's sake, they could maybe say, we've got this laneway that is shared between us. Could this be parking? Yeah, good, go ahead. Or you could get a really bad neighbor that says, I'm going to go to the council and I'll vehemently stand against this. So it could frustrate the process, but it won't stop the process. That's how it typically works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just found that interesting. I mean, I think it's a good idea to, you're informing your neighbors, when you're getting some buy-in there. Cause, I'll be honest with you personally, for me, I now know of 3 on my street alone. And it sometimes kind of a little bit bothers me to a certain degree, a quiet street turned into a lot more traffic on our street during times. So I think it's an interesting concept. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Sorry, was there anybody else in the queue? Councillor Race?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right now, I want to talk about liability. We know we have existing Airbnbs. We don't know the number of egresses from a particular building. We don't know if there are fire extinguishers, fire alarms. We know nothing. Who would be liable in the event of a tragic incident? Oh, I hope I'm unmuted.
You are.
Okay.
Administration? Yeah, if I could go again, thank you, CA Olson, through the chair to council. And don't quote me on this, but I mean, if I look at the logic, if you are not licensed and the town has not issued you a license, then that liability is on you for your insurance to let your insurer know that from time to time, I do have other guests or activities happening at my house, and that they must make sure that they're code compliant with the gas outlets and all those. So it would fall onto the operator itself. But there could be, I mean, once we formulate this and we give approval for certain SDRs to go ahead, yes, then there becomes almost joint liability to a large extent. But I don't want to get into that right now because we're not there yet. But as it stands, for anyone operating without a license, it's on your insurance and your liability.
So thank you so much for that. Would it be prudent for us to, maybe follow up with our insurance providers, just to ask what they require of B&Bs? That wouldn't hurt to ask, eh?
Again, through the chair to Councillor Race, that could be a simple question to our insurers. What do they, because they deal with more than one municipality, some of our insurers, like AUMA, they have the whole umbrella, so they will have that at their fingertip. That's something we can do as an extra due diligence, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Haas?
Yeah, and I guess the question, thank you, about the insurance. So is it required right now, and forgive me if I'm not, I'm not certain because I don't own a business. If I were to have a home business and apply for it, receive it, is it required with that application that I also provide proof of insurance with that business license? you know, that I have the appropriate insurance on my home. Is that required currently?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor House. I don't see that as a requirement right now. Calgary, which is the larger municipality, I would imagine, nothing I could find from it. But you know, sometimes it's not in the information that you see online. We probably, if you ask one of the staff working there, they probably would advise you on a couple of things. So these are things that we could bring into our basket of requirements if that's really where the will of council lies.
Yeah, because the reason I bring that up, and I think, you know, it's important, and I've asked some of this of insurance companies, and I brought this up in previous email or previous discussions on this matter, is that if my neighbor has a fire, you know, and they are having, or they have a short-term rental within their property, their insurance company is not aware of it, but if that fire happens and it catches my house on fire, there's some concerns there that insurance may not, because they have that STR. There's some sticky parts there, right? Because I'm not certain, I'm not saying everybody, but I mean, there may be some individuals who are not letting their insurance providers know that they're currently having an STR in their residence. And I guess my, you know, thoughts is to protect not only the person with the STR, but also the neighboring, you know, is that it's required that if you have a business license, you know, to accommodate an STR, that you also have the appropriate insurance, you know, in place, being as how you are in that residence, and you're protecting, you know, not only yourself, but your neighbors as well. So I guess that's where my thoughts are with that. You know, moving forward potentially.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I really like where Councillor Ha is going with this. I would, you know, like to add, just so you can put this into your memory bank, when these people are applying for a business license, that they also have to supply the fire inspection, that it has been done. We're not going to let you get your license and then hopefully get a fire inspection. That fire inspection is done prior to you getting your business license. So please remember that in the event that I forget to bring it up in later conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I guess at this point in the conversation, I wanted to ask administration, how should we be starting to funnel and focus this conversation a little bit? I appreciate in the last slide there are some key workshop takeaways that might happen, but I guess I wanted to focus the conversation a little bit on what we should be doing for direction or next steps. So I look to administration just to kind of comment on that a little bit, and maybe we can start down that path.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think what we're looking for tonight is to understand the sense of urgency from council moving forward. Is this something that that we have time to address, and we can have a starting point perhaps coming out of tonight's meeting? We've heard about the business license portion, the proof of insurance being important. If there's a starting point that we can kind of address tonight, it doesn't mean that more can't be added later on if council has an appetite to kind of start small and see where it goes. On the flip side, if there's a sense of urgency where we'd like to put a full program in place to look at bylaws, look at what can be done, we just want to understand that from all of council. If there's anything further that you haven't received tonight, if there's more information that's required that would help us along, that's important for us to know as well. But if we can figure out a starting point, and that will give administration some direction in what we come back with and the time frame in which we do that. So I'd like to Mr. Rousseau, if there's any other objectives from the workshop tonight that you had, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, CEO Olson, through the chair to council. I think you've captured it pretty well, that if we can collate everything we've heard, that council, I've heard business license, insurance, I've heard, must be a principal residence of yours. and we make sure that the insurers advise all those type of languages in it. So maybe if we bring back and maybe bolder what council would like to direct us in a report, and then that report can lead us to the guideline as well as a draft bylaw potentially. And as Sia Olsen said, what is the timeline that you would like us to bring this back to you?
Excellent. Appreciate that feedback, administration. With that said, I have Councillor Magoon in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my question is for council and administration. I hear that administration has taken a few things out of this conversation so far, and that's good. But because I guess my concern is I feel like there's not a lot of form so far, and I'm just wondering if this is something that's best worked on through a working group. Certainly I don't think it has to be a big and onerous one, but again, I wonder if a working group would serve us best in this instance to bring something back to council. And again, that's a question. That's not even an opinion. And I'm throwing that out to the rest of council and admin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Since that was thrown out to anybody, anybody care to comment? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my first train of thought too. And then I was looking at timelines. We're in the month of May, almost June, an election in October. It only hurts sort of the deliverable. So I throw back another question of, it just depends how deep we want to go into this. And I'm with Councillor Nelson. I think he had said earlier, it's something simple, easy. One condition that I would want is for this to be maybe reviewed within 18 months. So the next, so you have a kind of like a pilot project bylaw in place. Well, it's obviously not a pilot, but you have a bylaw with the intention of the next council to get information, I'd say 24 months at the latest as a review date to see, hey, what's working, what's not, and how much can we add to this. But if we're going to try to make this perfect, we're going to probably really struggle with this. So let's pick a couple of the common denominators, which is business license, insurance. Maybe we can't go much further than that. Maybe one or two other little things. Agree that we're going to review this, or the next council will, and get something out ASAP, because I think we do have to formalize this, and let's not put the whole onus on this council to bring it all home. So that's sort of my insight or my point of view of how this is going to be sort of transitioned in the next few years. Thanks.
I have myself up in the queue next, and then Councillor Magoon and Councillor Haas. And I agree with the principle of simplicity right now. I love the concept that Councillor Nelson introduced, which was just trying to get some business licenses so we can track what's actually going on and where it's occurring. And then from there, we can review it, or council can review it in a year or so. And I think that's a pretty prudent approach to things. Send administration back with some basic principles we want adhered to, and I think it should center around safety as much as possible, and getting business licenses. So I guess I agree with Councillor Nelson and with Mayor Michaels what he said. So I will then pass the torch over to Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, and thanks for those comments. I think that helps it solidify it a little bit more for me. I'm comfortable with all of those comments. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Haas.
I think CEO Olsen had her hand up there first, so I'll defer to her first.
My apologies. CAO Olsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just looking at this, if we're looking at the business license portion and maybe some criteria or requirements under that business license piece, as a starting point, this is something that we could look at our business license bylaw very simply, including something that would address this as opposed to a new bylaw. It's just a suggestion. It could be the starting point that we're looking at. If this is starting small and keeping it simple, then it's an existing bylaw that could be brought back with some amendments that would capture what council's looking to do around the business licensing. If there's more to it and their conversation continues, maybe that's not a great idea. I just put it out there as an option.
Thank you, CAO Olsen. Councillor Haas, back to you.
Yeah, and actually, I appreciate that, CEO Olson, because I was of the same mind as how can we add potentially the concept of tourist home. It seems to be the most flexible type, but how can we incorporate that potentially into our existing already, business license, amending it or something? Because, it seems like that it's very similar, I guess, what Camore, you said, Mr. Rousseau has adopted is that tourist home concept. And, I would see that personally, that's very similar to our area as well. So, instead of reinventing, the full bylaw, getting that start with the business license and some of the, maybe some of those parameters too of what we want to see in our community, like, whether or not apartments are fit into that or something, of that nature. But I do want to move forward to this with simple, but something deliverable in a short period of time, possibly. So, thank you,
Councillor Haas. Council, anything? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like CEO Olson's suggestion. So I kind of want to take a moment and talk about where does that limit us? Because as much as I said, I want to keep it simple. If we went that route and we don't do an actual new bylaw, can we add smaller things to it? And I was kind of looking it up quickly. Or is this essentially a line item saying that Airbnbs or STRs have a fee and that's it? Or can you go more into detail and sort of add some conditions if we take that approach? Any insight on that?
CA Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I may wish to collaborate with Mr. Rousseau a little bit. We're kind of working behind the scenes to come up with options to bring to council, but we can do that up front as well. The business license bylaw is one piece. I reflected on it in a moment, and I realized that there's likely a component to the LUB that would need to change as well. And that may be the vehicle in which to capture some of those smaller things. So I look to Mr. Rousseau if he can assist with that answer.
Yeah, thank you, CEO Olson, through the chair. I mean, the LUB will have to be amended. I was speaking to Mr. Walker about this, that we've got a bunch of things that the LUB needs to be updated with this year. So this would be a good inclusion because we haven't started that process yet. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that you could, if you want to be nimble about it, I just looked at the city of Victoria. They got a 4-page bylaw. And really, if I look at it, we could, I'm not extinguishing what Ms. Olson was saying, but and I'm just thinking as we go, so pardon me, is that they took a 4-page and they captured everything in there, from business licenses to security to insurance to parking, and then couple that down the road with an operator's guide. That would be a good dovetail as well. So we could look at that as well. I'm just throwing out another option. Keep it simple. That's what they have, Victoria.
If I may follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. With that comment, that kind of solidifies me going back to the other way, that I'd want a simplistic bylaw. I appreciate the suggestion, but I think this really sets up the next step much better if to have that bylaw, and then hopefully us, council, all 7 of us, go through this simple bylaw as simply as possible. So that'll really, the onus will be on us to do so. So I appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Michaels. Anyone else, council? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I was in the queue. I agree. If it's just adding verbiage into other documents, that actually really concerns me from a transparency standpoint. I know us sitting here right now, we think this is going to be pretty simple and straightforward, and the buy-in will be fine. But West Kelowna, I still don't think they have theirs passed yet. At a public hearing when they started, they had over 100 respondents, and that's 30,000 people. So, us talking about it is easy and simple, and it all makes a lot of sense. But it is something that could greatly impact people's property values, and people could own multiple houses. So it isn't something that that would just slide by easily, I don't think. And so I think it's something when we're looking at timelines and looking at capacity, I think we should be prepared for there to be a decent amount of feedback from all sides of this. And we've had those conversations amongst ourselves, and I think we've captured a lot of those things. But when we start going to regulate things that people own, it's going to likely get a little bit more challenging than the workshop sort of setting that we have right now. So I would still support us moving forward if council's ready to go and all in this go around, and we're not going to just go back on it and be wishy-washy. I'm fine with going forward and doing a simple bylaw. I think we have the tools to do it. I just don't want to send administration off to do bylaws and then us pull back again, like we did, a year ago or something. So if we're committed to it, I'm fine supporting it. And I would look forward to where we get to it. But if we're not, fully committed right now, then I think it's also prudent to leave it to the next council, see where the election goes, see where housing prices go, because Hinton's one of the few places they haven't been rising in anywhere. So it's a unique time, but I don't think there's a time with a ton of pressure at this moment. So
thank you, Councillor Nelson. I have Councillor Haas in the queue.
Yeah, and I'm all for a simple bylaw as well. I'm would like to see this move forward. I think it's the right time for it. We've got some feedback. I do agree that it may not be simple. In fact, one of the parts of the conversation I had with someone brought up the fact of comparing it actually to the trailer courts and the fact that they don't have a business license, and we're going to be asking private home owners to have business licenses, and they compared that. So there will be some, I think, some learning and some conversation to become. But I think that we have knocked this around a bit, but based on feedback from the community and stakeholders, plus this workshop, I think that there's a chance that we can get this right, simple and effective, that we can get buy-in from the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify that I do believe both of those bylaws will need to be updated, even with a simple bylaw. If we're adding permitted uses, that LUB has to be updated. And if we're adding a new business license category, that has to be updated too. So as much as a simple bylaw, it's great. We can move forward with that and capture what council's vision is. It will require the updates of both of those pieces before it's concluded. So I just wanted to clarify.
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my last question, because it sounds like we're going down the path where we might be comfortable to give a direction to get a draft bylaw. Engagement is how do we fit engagement in? Do we task administration with getting that feedback from the community? How do we want that to look? Or do we want a draft bylaw like we do with some other items and then get that feedback after? That's, I think, a question that we have to sort of work into this timeline. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's a couple of pieces that would go along with working on the bylaw and bringing this forward. Communication to the public and to the community that this is something that council's discussing. So some good communications to support this moving forward. As far as engagement goes, there's if council wishes to have an engagement period, the period between the draft bylaw coming forward and that conversation more formally taking place with direction or decision from council, there could be a pocket of time where there is a public engagement plan where input or feedback from the community can be solicited. As well, through the bylaw, the LUB, there is that public hearing component, I believe, for the LUB. Is that correct, Mr. Russo? So there is that opportunity before it is stamped and moves ahead for that public hearing piece to take place as well. So there will be a few opportunities, I think, And knowing that, this has an impact to the community, we put together some information in the plan as that draft bylaw comes forward, and really stressing that it's a draft and it's to continue this conversation in a more formal or framed way.
Mayor Michaels? Thank you. Yeah, Council, anything else? I guess CAO Olson, say we did come up with some sort of direction this evening. What sort of timeline are we looking at? If we asked administration to come back with, say, a loose draft or something to consider and poke holes at or add to, what sort of timeline are we looking at?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So without having had an ample opportunity to speak to the folks that will be participating in the report, research and pulling that together, Mr. Rousseau and I were conferring behind the scenes, and we think it's fair at the outside for it to be coming back in August. Again, we do our best to bring things forward as quickly as we can. If it snaps together a little bit easier than that, knowing that this area has a number of things on the go right now, I think it's fair to bring it back in August. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'll take a stab at it and see how it goes. I'd like to make a direction that administration, knocked it out of the way, bring back a draft short-term rental bylaw to a standing committee before August 31st, 2021. And again, I think at this point, it's more if the intent and the timing fits within everybody's expectations. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Councilor Magoon. We now have a direction on the board. First, administration, is that sufficient to give you, is that sufficient direction for what you need from us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think so. I think in the report that accompanies the draft bylaw, we will address what is required through amendments to any other legislation that we would need to bring forward, and kind of do our best to provide that whole conversation and full slate of information to council as we proceed with that discussion at that time.
Excellent. Thank you, CAO Olson. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, and I'll be speaking in favor of this. It speaks to, a lot of things, the level playing field, and, all in fairness, it just, I think it's the right direction to go. We, as CEO Olson, there will be time for public feedback. I'm sure that, as councillors, we may hear from individuals based on this meeting and workshop in this direction. And then there's other opportunities for it. So looking forward to seeing, that draft bylaw and hearing from the community as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I have Councillor Nelson in the queue.
Thank you. I've noticed on our action tracking that some of the boardwalk items, especially capital expenditures, have been moved under planning and development. And from what I recall, rec center items also fall under planning and development. Am I correct in that?
CAO Olson.
Yes, there's been some change in how the projects are initiated and the handoff between the development services and infrastructure services. I know this is something that Mr. Rousseau has been working with Dale with. If you have anything to add, Mr. Rousseau, please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, CA Olson, through the chair. How this came about that it's under development, so especially the rec center, because I worked on the granting possibilities through the ISIP. And so I presented that report, and they say by October 31st, I think we have to come back to council with respect to that ISEP kit and the expression of interest that I mentioned, as well as the process of procuring the project through the IDP, is it IPD process. So that's where that change came in, Councillor Nelson.
So
Councillor
if I could follow up more, this is more to council. So we talked, I don't know, a few weeks ago, a month ago, about bringing back the next steps of the rec center in parallel with this grant thing, and looking at the Beaver Boardwalk and its tenders under planning development, and this parallel process with the rec center, which is motions that have been delayed since 2018. To me, those are of higher priority than getting partway through a bylaw that I think is unlikely for this council to take from start to finish if it's coming back in August. So I'm not going to be in favor of it, not because I don't think it's important, but I don't want to prioritize it above other things. And I just don't think if it's coming back at the end of August, we will see it all the way from start to finish. And I think continuity is really important when you're developing a bylaw that may have some pretty lasting impacts on our community, both positive and those seen as less than positive by the community. So I won't be in favor of this at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nelson. Council, anyone else wishing to speak to the direction on the board? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be in support of this. I think there's still an opportunity for us to do some work, and councils transcend one another. It's more challenging for some people than others to really understand that there's work that's going to be done 5 years prior and work that will be continued. We represent the elected, we represent residents in our community who want us to still do work. So if we can partially get it there, I still think there's it's still an obligation for us to do so. Mr. Russo said there are examples out there where we can simplify this. There's 4-pagers. We kept saying the word simplify and easy. So to turn back on doing something simple and easy that administration can pull off before August, I just don't see the rationale. Now, that being said, administration always has a latitude that if things come and change in the month of July and August, they'll tell us, unfortunately, because of the other competing priorities, this has to be delayed. I think we'll all agree and we'll all understand that this could be pushed further back. But until then, let's see if it could be done before the end of August, get a draft in front of the public and help out the next council because they'll have a long list of things to do. And I think we're all well aware the first year or two, it's kind of a blur, to be quite honest, for many people to get something tangible from a council, in their 4th year, I think is a good thing. So I'll be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will support this motion. I don't want to be seen as the council who pushes things down the road, who puts it off on the next council. I'd actually like to stop even talking about this election coming up and just, we're council of the day. We got a job to do. This draft bylaw may not be the best one, might have to be tweaked several times, but at least we'll have one. So I truly will support this. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Council, anyone else wish to speak to this motion before I call the question? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. It's not that I don't want to be I'm not thinking about a council that pushes things down the line. I'm looking at our action tracking and the amount of things that are already under that department that have already been delayed and pushed down. And I see adding another thing that doesn't have urgency, pushing other things down. And if we have an opportunity to do this by August, I think there's probably opportunity to do things that have been on that list for a little bit longer that have maybe some more urgency. Just based on my opinion, what I think our citizens are looking for. I think they want us to take care of the business that we already have before we start doing new business, unless that business is urgent. So it's not that I don't like it, and ultimately I'll absolutely support working through this bylaw as well as I can and providing a lot of feedback. But I would love to see some laser focus over the last little while and the time that we have Mr. Russo. I'm not sure how, I hope his contract is extended for 75 years, but we don't know that. And I want to make sure that we get as much out of him as we can in this short time. So thanks to everybody. And I just don't think it's the right time for this.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Anybody else? Okay, with that, I will call the question that administration bring back a draft short-term rental bylaw to a standing committee meeting before August 31st, 2021. Okay, all those in favor? And opposed? That was 5-1 in favor. Ms. Anderson? All right. Anything else from this workshop, council? No, if not, then thank you, administration, for the information and for getting us started down this path. We look forward to the report in August. Next on the agenda, council reporting. And I will, Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I see the action pending list here, and there was just one item I wanted to comment on.
That is further down in the agenda, I believe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. All right, council reporting. I'll start on my scenic right with Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Got a couple of things. Just a couple of real quick things, and then just to inform council on one matter. I attended an ASH meeting on Sunday in place. Councillor Race asked me to as alternate. Really nothing to report there. Business as usual. You know, really just talking about what's to come if and when COVID changes, the restrictions change. Library had a meeting last night. Just one little hiccup that we've experienced. So unfortunately, financials submitting to PLSB typically would occur. Unfortunately, though, because of our Director of Corporate Services is not available right now, who typically signs off on that that report, we have to wait until our June 8th regular meeting where council will approve a new appointed person in the meantime. So that kind of delayed things a little bit. We've got an extension with PLSB to submit that report. But yeah, so that's just from the library's point of situation. The one thing, though, that I wanted to inform council on is recently the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, it was communicated to us that as of June 1st, province is discontinuing our funding for the hazardous waste program. So we no longer, there won't be funding that. So unfortunately, that's put an unexpected financial burden on our authority. It typically, I think, anywhere from, I think it was $20,000 to $30,000 that was funded. So currently right now, what will be happening is we're going to be accepting those materials, but there will not be a toxic roundup that is normal, but people can bring those materials to our site. That will be stored currently until we can figure out and establish a plan moving forward. But I just wanted to inform council, we did that, our council, that Mr. Kreiner has drafted a letter to MLA Long and MLA Getson, you know, and signed by our chair, Don Mitchell, to express our, you know, concern with this. But yeah, and unfortunately, it was a hit to our budget because we've already approved our budget. So there's been a hit to that. It's estimated, provincial decision will add an estimated annual cost of $50,000 to our West Yellowhead Regional Authority, and may increase costs to our member municipalities as well. So just wanted to inform council that we are sending that letter. It has been, I believe, sent. It was drafted on May 10th. So wanted to let you know that. And that is all I have to report on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Haas, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was able to attend Synergy on Thursday, which is kind of energy producers that meets quarterly. Not a ton of news, but more activity in general happening, whether it's pipeline or Cascade. Lots going on. But one of the good numbers that was shared is TC Energy's local spend in Hinton was between $6 and $7 million in 2020. So goes to accommodation, staff, contracts, procurement. So a huge amount just through TC Energy and their projects in the town of Hinton. So I just thought I'd share that. They do some really great work on how they keep data. So it's awesome. That's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Race.
Nothing to report, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pulp advisory committee meeting. A shutdown is set for September 10th to the 26th. They're maximizing, not maximizing, the maximum amount of people on site at one time would be 500. Obviously, that will change depending on the rules and where we are with COVID in the month of September, but that's what they're planning. And they're also trying to try to, really extend their reach as a committee. Like what other members can we have around the table that could be, have their voices heard for the pulp mill. So that was really good. Regional Mayors event through BSN. It was kind of like the second annual. The first one was really more COVID related. This one, albeit really dominated by COVID. It's the intent of really getting our regional partners together, talking, getting their CAOs or new CAOs at the table, and really hearing the business community, hearing what else, where we're lacking, some of the deficiencies of different levels of government working together, and really being accessible, and really, I guess one theme was it's better to find out what your constituents or what people want before instead of delivering something and then trying to change it, last second. There's a few recent examples like the, camping outdoors, on recreational land that has proven to be challenging. So a good conversation. Like I said, it's all high level stuff, but again, sort of a status quo that we should be meeting and working with our regional partners all the time. Had a meeting with Minister McIver regarding these safety rest stops, and it looks like there was quite a bit of a 180-degree turn. And Mr. McIver, which I've never heard him say this really, and he kind of chuckled at it. He was completely wrong. He misassessed this, and he wants to get input from municipalities and communities on where they're going to go with these rest stops, because hypothetically they could put a huge rest stop. Is it going to be a strip mall? What kind of amenities will be there? It could be an OBED. It could, lead to, other long-term impacts of, a bypass in our community. And these people obviously not stopping in our community, even if there isn't a bypass. So I think they hit the brakes quite hard on this. I don't know where we go as a municipality. This conversation was yesterday. Mr. Russo joined me. And so hopefully more to come in the coming weeks on, okay, how do we position ourselves and what do we communicate that we want regarding these? And that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Recently, I've really been trying to take on a bit of a role as a cheerleader for small business and local business. And I just wanted to inform folks about quite the initiative that's come about from at least 15 to 20 of our local businesses. And basically, the idea is they put together a prize package for our citizens where they're trying to encourage local citizens to go ahead, support local business. And in exchange, they've put together a couple of again, massive prize packages. You know, it involves a wide variety of our local businesses. The golf course, Caldwell Banker, Apex Auto, Midwest Glass, Griffiths Ford, Big Rock Dodge, Leckerware, BCMI Inns, Best Western, and a schwack of others, notably some of the restaurants. You know, and they've put out this Hinton vacation package through Facebook, where the idea is to get citizens to go take a picture of themselves supporting local business. And if they post it on the site, then they're automatically entered for these 2 prize packages. And I just thought that was an awesome thing that I saw going on in our community, where local businesses are essentially trying to solve the problem of, you know, how is COVID getting us down and how can we creatively deal with that? So, you know, I just wanted to give a big shout out to them. You know, businesses helping businesses by offering some great prizes to our local citizens. And that's good. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Magoon. I myself have nothing to report, so we'll move to urgent matters. I'll go in the same order. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one matter. I realize the time, but I do want to share it. I'll share it quickly. I sent an email out to the rest of council. I attended the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Conference just recently. They had a small 15-minute or 20-minute, I guess, session on victim services units. And there's a concern out there right now, and it's kind of twofold. One, the Bill 16 has impacted the crime victims of crime fund. What it's done now is it's allocated, or it's allowed diverting that fund to other matters such as police, hiring of police and prosecution. And the concern is that it's taking away funds from the victims of crime, which might ultimately to impact the funding for victim services units in Alberta. That's one part of it. The other part that I wanted to bring to the radar of council, and I have spoke to our local director of VSU here in Hinton, and there's a conversation occurring within the province of looking at how victim services, the structure of it, and how it may change. And one of the options is to look at the municipalities actually moving forward with the operations of victim services, which will impact the budget as well for us. It's not the option, but it's one of the options. And so the long short is the session in the conference was suggesting that municipalities potentially, you know, a letter of support for victim services to keep the funding the way it is, but also, you know, to the structure of it, you know, and my concern is the possibility of this also then becoming a budget item for us as well in the future if it were to become, you know, an operation of the municipality. So apparently the MLAs are meeting in the fall to have further conversation about this. But I just really wanted to put it on council's radar. And if you're talking to MLAs at any point, is maybe, you know, to ask about what the intention might be and some conversation around that. So I'm just, like I said, with conversation, there's a lot of uncertainty with that organization currently right now, and such a vital, you know, service to all our, you know, municipalities. It's just something that I think is valued, and my concern is that are we going to be able to sustain if it is a municipal operation? So just wanted to throw that out there. That was brought up at the conference. So any questions, you can contact either myself or VSU, or just wanted to put it on the radar of council. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Nelson, any urgent matters? Okay. Councillor Race. Mayor Michaels. Okay. Councillor Magoon. I also have none, so that'll move us through to Chief Administrative Officer. CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to take a moment and acknowledge and thank Ms. Howarth and our senior leadership team and the rest of the group here at the town for managing things in my absence over the last week and a half. Was off for some medical reasons, on the road to recovery, and hoping to just continue on, keep on keeping on. So I just wanted to thank everyone for that smooth transition and managing things so well. It really makes all the difference when you're off against your will, I guess. Also want to update council and the community. I will be participating in the local staff sergeant recruitment process next week. There's interviews on May 28th. I've been working with the hiring committee on questions and on preparation for that. So I'm looking forward to participating in that process next week. I will move to the action pending list just in the interest of time. I don't have too much to update to council and a moment to questions. The list has been updated to align with the financial deliverables information report that council received from Mr. Osmond, and a number of items have moved off due to completion. That's really all I'll say on the action pending list tonight. If there's any questions before we move on, I know Councillor Race had indicated she had something to touch on.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. On MD 2244, the due date, I think it might just be a typo. We had the discussion, I believe, April 27th, and it says the due date is, I think, January of 21. So.
Sorry, what number was that again, Councillor Race?
MD 2244. And I'll get you the page number. That would be page 8 of 11 or 71 of 74.
And your question was around the due date?
Yeah, it says December of 2021. You know what? I read that wrong. My apologies. I did.
So no question for administration then?
No, we're good. I'm good. My apologies. Sorry, guys.
Okay. CEO Olson, anything else? Oh, sorry. Councillor Nelson.
My question is around the rec center stuff, and I don't know if this is for administration or for the agenda prep committee. When we approved the last motion around the rec center to do with grant readiness, we had talked about doing the other steps as far as moving forward the process in parallel with that. I was just curious if there's an update on a couple of the outstanding action items with the rec center and whether those will be coming to council.
I guess I'll send that to you, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that was the discussion, and I would have to confer with administration on the timelines for those. That was the intention, was to bring some of these things forward in parallel over the summer. And I can update council later on. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
Yeah, if I could, where I'm struggling a little bit is we can't make a motion for them to come sooner because they're already on action tracking. And so I know citizens keep saying, well, what are you've approved to go out looking for grants, but what are you actually building? And they're saying, well, when are you guys going to be discussing it? And I say, it was supposed to come before the end of 2019. So I'm just looking for some sort of certainty which items will come back when, and I guess I can do that as I just don't know the process of asking for that when it's already on there with a timeline.
CEO Olson.
That's something that I can provide some clarity to for council and for the public. I know that was a component of the conversation that council had the last time around, and we're comfortable moving forward with the grant preparation with the due date of, I think, October this year, but to look at what we can achieve on some of those other items as well. I acknowledge that they've been outstanding for quite a while, but there's some pretty legitimate reasons for why that is. So I appreciate that it's been a bit of a frustrating process and can provide that information to council and to the public.
Yeah, and if I could, I'm not even looking for urgency of them happening. It's just something more certain, because we're moving forward with other parts of it. So I'm just looking for certainty. You know, if it's next action tracker that it's on there and updated, I'm fine with that. But just so we can say to citizens what we're doing. So thank you.
All right. Council, anything else for CAO Olson with regards to the action pending? CAO Olson, anything else?
No, that's everything.
Excellent. Thank you. Legislative services update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Executive assistant logistics information.
And I have nothing to report.
Excellent. As it is now 8 p.m. Council, we've got a decision to make. We're scheduled to have a closed session mutual performance discussion. Is it everyone's intention to move forward with that? And if so, I will need a motion to extend. Councillor Magoon. Sorry, you're on mute, sir.
I was bound to happen. Sorry, I don't know what everybody else's intention is, but just very quickly, I think that's something that we could hold off to another day. I'd rather not see us extend just to deal with that. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Haas and then Mayor Michaels.
I guess before is there any from CAO Olson administration anything pressing that you see to move forward that it could be talked about another time, or I guess that's my question.
CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were a few items to bring forward. Some can be achieved through an email to council this week. I'm open to council's decision on that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion on the board. Council, all those in favor? All right, that was unanimous. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.